Welcome back, everyone. We are on the item on our agenda that is beneath second reading of ordinances, which have no items tonight. We are in a study session. Item number 13 is to consider directing staff to prepare a city ordinance to govern the permitting of small cell facilities within the public right-of-way. And we have from our staff, Chad Mosley, Assistant Director of Public Works, to present the staff report. Welcome, Chad.
Thank you, Mayor. Give me 1 second to share my screen. Does everybody see that?
We can see it.
Very good. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm Chad Mosley, Assistant Director of Public Works and City Engineer. As you know, there's been fairly consistent interest in the installation of small wireless facilities within Cupertino, and this at times has caused concern with residents. These concerns are important to us and we prioritize them, attempting to balance the responses to those concerns with our legal authority. Tonight, we want to review what the city has been doing to explore opportunities to revise our standards. We can be limited by federal and state law, and in some aspects, but we want to step back from those and take this opportunity just to hear concerns and suggested solutions. We'll use the conversation tonight to guide modifications to the draft ordinance provided in the packet. With council direction, we'll bring that ordinance back at a future meeting for consideration and a first reading. Tonight, we are requesting that council consider directing staff to proceed with the preparation of a final ordinance and regulations for governing small cell facilities in the right-of-way. We would also like your thoughts and input on the draft ordinance and regulations, and more specifically, some of the key points that the draft ordinance that the draft ordinance and regulations that we will look at further detail later in this presentation. We'll collect and review this input to incorporate any revisions that are permissible by law into the final ordinance and regulations. There is no need to vote on your ideas and input. We will consider all your suggestions. Once the revision is complete, we'll bring the ordinance and regulations back to council for adoption. We'll also provide responses to any items that were not incorporated and the reason these items could not be included. With this presentation, I'll provide some of the overarching information on what cities have the authority to do and where federal and state regulations have limited cities' authority. I will provide an overview of what Cupertino has done to better serve residents, and I will discuss proposed revisions to the city installation preferences for small wireless facilities, as well as other items included in the draft ordinance and regulations, which we would believe will help better serve the community. As many of you are aware, cities have been placed in the difficult position of ensuring compliance with federal and state regulations while also trying to serve their residents and the community. Federal and state regulations have given local governments the authority to establish aesthetic standards for these facilities and to manage facility placements to ensure public safety and to coordinate the use of the right-of-way. To manage the aesthetic impacts of these facilities, a local government is permitted to set reasonable design standards, such as requiring screening of facilities and having equipment coloring match the existing pole. Cupertino has established a design standard for these facilities, and we have required wireless providers to install facilities that match the standard. The image shown here is one such installation in Cupertino. Cities have very limited additional authority when it comes to permitting these facilities, which is discussed later in the next slide. So Cupertino has tried to better serve its residents by enhancing transparency, providing a robust notification process that includes the longest notification period of any city in Santa Clara County, by establishing permitting guidelines that are clear and work to minimize aesthetic impacts, and by providing an abundance of information and tools on its website, including an opportunity where residents can sign up to be notified via email of small wireless facilities permitting activities. The draft ordinance and regulations include additional provisions that further strengthen the city's permitting process These provisions were selected and carefully balanced to serve the community while also ensuring ongoing compliance with federal and state regulations in order to help keep the city of Cupertino out of an loss. These provisions will be discussed later in the presentation. State and federal laws and regulations, including the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996 and provisions of the California Government Code and Public Code, govern how local jurisdictions may regulate wireless facilities, including those within the public right-of-way. The city's authority to regulate aesthetics is balanced against state and federal laws and regulations that limit the scope of local government action regarding wireless facilities, and small cells in particular. A September 26, 2018 Federal Communications Commission order placed even stricter limits on local regulation. These limits were designed to facilitate rapid deployment of small wireless facilities and to prevent constraints on carriers' ability to provide a full range of wireless service. Cities are not permitted to regulate placement of small wireless facilities based on concerns over the health effects of these facilities and may not create regulations that have the effect of inhibiting a carrier from improving the quality of their service. One such prohibition would be to establish an unreasonable space. The FCC typically states that minimum spacing requirement for small wireless facilities that has the effect of materially inhibiting wireless service would be considered an effective prohibition of service. The draft ordinance does have a preferred spacing distance, but it is specifically focused on facilities owned by the same carrier. This is to ensure that no single carrier can establish a monopoly within a set area. The FCC has also set short shot clocks for review and permitting of small wireless facility applications. That shot clock consists of a 90-day period for attaching a small cell facility to a new or replacement structure. It should be noted that the city's current guidelines comply with the FCC shot clock, but the city utilizes the entire shot clock timeline. The City Council has conducted prior study sessions for small wireless facilities in past years. At the April 2021 study session, Council requested that staff consider preparing a municipal code ordinance to codify wireless standards for facilities located in the public way. Anybody who is interested in reviewing the information that was presented previously may do so by accessing the City Council's agendas on the Cupertino website, or you can go to the city's small cell web page at the link shown here. Before discussing the draft ordinance and the proposed modifications to the permitting regulations, I want to provide some information on activities the city has initiated to serve our residents and the community and to respond to input and suggestions provided by council in the past. The first of these items is the city's outreach efforts, which have been designed to provide multiple avenues in which residents can be notified and provide input of proposed installations. One avenue of outreach is through the city's requirement for mailed notifications, which are sent to property owners situated near a proposed small cell facility. The notification provides information about a proposed facility and includes a photo simulation of the equipment, as well as contact information where residents can provide input to the applicant and the city. The city has set aside a 21-day period in which permitting activities are halted to allow property owners and residents an opportunity to provide input on the proposed facility. It should be noted that while permitting activities are halted, the FCC designated 90-day shot clock continues to run during this period. Correspondence from residents is logged and reviewed and responded to, and the city works to address any issues and concerns where possible and where permissible by federal law. As stated previously, this notification period is the longest of any cities in the surrounding area. The mailed notifications have been the city's most successful approach to alerting residents of installations, and the information provided by residents has at times resulted in the city being able to implement certain revisions to proposed facilities. In some instances, the city has been able to work with providers to have facilities relocated to better address aesthetic impacts pointed out by residents. While this is not always possible, it does highlight that resident input is important, and the city does work within its limits to address these concerns. The city also requires wireless providers to place door hanger notices at nearby properties 7 days prior to the start of permitted construction activities. And further, the city's page provides residents with an opportunity to provide the city with their opinion on whether or not they prefer small wireless facilities in their vicinity, as well as the ability to sign up for email notifications of any permitting activities. Residents can fill out the survey and sign up for the email notifications by navigating to the link provided on the slide. Residents who have already filled out the survey and who have signed up for these notifications were sent an email making them aware of this meeting tonight. The second area in which Cupertino has worked to serve the community is through the establishment of aesthetic standards. Federal regulations do permit cities to establish reasonable aesthetic design standards for small wireless facilities. With this in mind, in 2016, the City Council had requested that all small wireless facilities have a generally homogeneous appearance to reduce mismatched and ad hoc designs. City staff coordinated with various wireless providers, including AT&T, Verizon, Mobility, and Crown Castle, to establish a design standard that would accommodate each provider's various equipment types within the shrouding dimensions, thus securing a uniformity in construction. The city has also established spacing requirements for small wireless facilities. The current requirement has established a 500-foot minimum distance between facilities installed by the same carrier. This enables the city to manage the build-outs of various providers and to help ensure a single provider is not able to monopolize wireless services within any pockets of the city. To better manage network build-outs and the visual impacts from small wireless facilities, the city is proposing to expand the minimum spacing to 750 feet. We believe this enhancement will still enable providers to create the network services they desire while better ensuring no single carrier can monopolize service. Finally, the city has established site preference standards, which create 3 tiers that prioritize installation of new wireless facilities in commercial areas before residential areas, when a provider's service needs can be met at both locations. Further, when a provider proposes a location in one of the city's least preferred areas, they must furnish documentation showing that the site is the only feasible option available to meet their needs. The draft ordinance recommends expanding to a 7-tier preference list, which will continue to prioritize commercial areas over residential zones, but also adds additional least preferred facilities which create greater visual and aesthetic impacts to the community. Again, the current guidelines establish 3 site preference categories which are used to situate facilities in least intrusive location feasible within a geographic area. Category 1, preferred locations include those streetlights in non-residential areas. 2, which are the less preferred locations, include all areas within residential zoning districts. In Category 3, preferred locations include those streetlights within 20 feet of occupied structures, 100 feet from school structures and public playgrounds, feet from signal options. The city's guidelines do not permit installation of small cell facilities in Category 3 sites if there are non-Category 3 sites available within 500 feet, unless carriers can show that there are no other feasible locations within 500 feet that meet their service needs. These siting guidelines work towards reducing visual and aesthetic impacts to the public and to residential neighborhoods while also providing a clear process for locating these facilities in less visually intrusive areas. It should be noted that these preferred siting guidelines did not establish a moratorium in any regions of the city, but work to steer installations to more preferred locations whenever possible. In keeping this topic, the city of Los Altos had established strict location requirements for the placement of wireless facilities in residential and within 500 feet of schools, with very limited exceptions that were challenging for carriers to meet. Both Verizon Wireless and AT&T had submitted applications for small cells in restricted areas where they stated their wireless service was inadequate. These applications were denied by the city of Los Altos, and both companies filed lawsuits in January of 2020. Those lawsuits asserted that Los Altos small cell regulations amounted to an unlawful ban on wireless services in the vast majority of the city. Although both carriers presented the city with information explaining why the sites in question were necessary to meet their service needs, the city council found that the information was insufficient to establish that a denial would violate the law. The city of Los Altos revised its wireless ordinance in June of 2022. These revisions no longer ban small cell facilities near schools or in residential areas, but establish a tier of preferred and less preferred locations, similar to those used by the city of Cupertino. After the revisions to the Los Altos ordinance were made, the judge dismissed the lawsuit, reasoning that the revised ordinance rendered the carrier's complaints moot. The judge's decision has since been appealed by the carriers. As indicated previously, the proposed regulations lay out a 7-tiered preference list. Tier 1 installations are those located in mixed use and non-residential areas and have been designated the most preferred locations in the city. Each successive tier from 2 to 7 is less preferred than the previous tier, with tier 7 being the least preferred types of installations due to the aesthetic impact facilities have. City council can different priorities or add further items as long as they do not inhibit the provision of cellular coverage. This revised preference list was created to better serve the community and to have a greater impact on helping the city meet resident needs. Just for visual reference, here are some photos of small wireless facilities that have been installed on utility poles within other jurisdictions in the Bay Area. We have listed these in Tier 6 as one of the city's least preferred installation alternatives due to the aesthetic impacts. And here are some photos of strand-mounted wireless facilities. The city of Cupertino has been working diligently and successfully to steer small wireless facilities away from these types of designs and those on wooden utility poles in order to minimize visual impacts to the community. The draft ordinance prepared by the city helps to ensure local control over placement of small wireless facilities is retained to the greatest extent permitted under state and federal law. It also provides clear and enforceable rules that can be applied to network buildouts. The ordinance clarifies and includes provisions listed here. The first, it requires carriers to obtain a wireless right-of-way permit for any installation of a wireless facility in the public right-of-way. It authorizes the adoption of regulations to implement the provisions of the ordinance. The ordinance requires any revisions to the regulations other than minor modifications as defined to be approved by the city council. The ordinance establishes an application procedure and requires that applicants provide notice to all residents and property owners within 300 feet of the proposed small wireless facility. It authorizes the city councils to establish a fee for processing wireless right-of-way permit applications. It also authorizes the Public Works Director to make findings to approve or deny a wireless right-of-way permit application and provides for an administrative appeal of the director's decision. And it includes provisions for the revocation of permits and the removal of equipment following the revocation or termination of a wireless right-of-way permit. The draft regulations provide more in-depth information regarding requirements and permitting procedures. The substantive modifications from the city's existing guidelines are focused within the regulations and include the following provisions. It establishes specific application requirements, including requirements to evaluate alternative locations for proposed small wireless facilities and to prepare an RF compliance report for each facility. The regulations also incorporate radio frequency testing requirements, which are currently incorporated into the city's master license agreements with wireless providers. It encourages a voluntary pre-submittal community meeting consistent with FCC rulemakings. It authorizes the peer review of applicant submittals at the expense of the applicant. The regulations establish standard conditions of approval and establish siting and placement preferences for small wireless facilities with mixed use and non-residential districts being the most preferred locations. It includes detailed design standards, including standards for noise, landscaping, concealment, lighting, and facility size, and establish 100-foot separation radius between small wireless facilities from the same carrier unless the applicant demonstrates that installation of a facility within that is required by applicable state and federal law, or if the director determines a less preferred location is necessary to protect public health, safety, or welfare based on clear and convincing evidence and specific characteristics of the location and proposed facility. Finally, to reiterate our objectives and next steps, we are requesting that council vote on whether to proceed with preparation of a final ordinance and regulations for governing small cell facilities in the right of way. Like your input and suggestions on the provisions contained within the draft ordinance and regulations that were prepared for this meeting. We will collect your input tonight. We will review this information and will implement revisions to our permitting process where permissible within the regulatory framework. And if council does vote to prepare a final ordinance and regulations, we will then, when the revisions process is complete, we'll bring the ordinance and regulations back to council for adoption. We will also provide responses to any items that were not incorporated and the reason these items could not be included. And that concludes the presentation, and staff is here to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chad. Much appreciated. And we will go on to our members of the public. If you have any comments or questions to share here, we're going to go ahead and call on you. We'll go by order of Zoom and then blue cards, followed by any emails that come in these first 3 minutes, I should say, to citycouncil@cupertino.org. I see one member of the public with a hand raised on Zoom. That is Venkat Ranganathan, and we have Jennifer Griffin as a blue card. Now I have San R as well on Zoom. And so once again, by the time the first person is done speaking, or 3 minutes, whatever is longer, please have your hand raised or a blue card in or an email in to cityclerk@cupertino.org to be heard in public comment on this item number 13. Venkat, you're first. You'll have up to 3 minutes. Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Good evening, Council. So this is Venkat Ranganathan. I've been a resident of Cupertino for more than 12 years and in the area for nearly 3 decades. I have been raising this 5G related issue and got I got asked to participate in this, included by Chad also, who have exchanged some emails with. I'm happy that there is a draft regulation that is being proposed that has some better control from the city, but still I see that there are some places where it could go a little bit more. For example, there is no need for a tower every 500 feet. If we go every 1,200 feet, then the number of towers per that we need in the city would be cut down to 1/4. So that is one thing that I wanted to highlight. And then in terms of the setback from dwelling structures, there are certain places where it is just 2-3 feet away from the dwelling structure, more than what is proposed, like 24 feet from my house, from the bedroom. So we need to take into consideration the type of dwelling unit that is closest to the pole. You know, if it is a garage with no access, that may be another one, or if there is and then if there is another option for the carrier within 100 feet or 150 feet. For example, in my case, there is a perimeter road which can provide similar access. The city should look at these kind of options and provide look into those when they revise the final.
Venkat, we can't hear you anymore, if you can hear me. Okay. All right. If it's a technical issue, Venkat, if you can hear me, we can't hear you. So.
I can. Okay. Now I can hear you. I was not able to hear you for a few seconds.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Please proceed. You have about a minute left.
Yeah. So I just wanted to convey that the setback requirements, etc., are better taken care of in the final ordinance. As I said, there are alternate areas to use. Please consider them before taking the locations that the carriers propose, because even least my location is a least preferred one, but still it was being used. So that's what I wanted to say, even though there were additional options available. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Venkat. Our next speaker is San R. Welcome, San.
Okay, thank you for staying late on your last council meeting. I do want to thank Chad Mosley for an excellent job in pulling this ordinance together and presenting it in a manner that everyone can clearly understand. I do want to point out that this area of Cupertino has a number of tech professionals working in a hybrid environment right now, working from home. And as we continue to build out new mixed-use retail construction in the corridor of Stevens Creek and other areas, the amount of consumption capacity is going to increase on these carriers. And as people continue to work from home, the load continues to increase. As the previous speaker, Venkat, was probably experiencing firsthand, lack of signal is going to be a major factor for people working from home. So the double whammy here is going to be offices are shrinking in space. People are asked to work from edge offices, which means they're in agile offices and having to visit when needed, but otherwise assume they're working from home. And continuing to see added capacity of residential units, added capacity of people working remotely, and at the same time, a lack of adequate facilities for 5G infrastructure could impact the ability to work from the area. So I would urge the City Council to, and the future City Council as well, to look at the lessons learned from Los Altos. If you go into the Los Altos library, you can't even get signal out there. So certainly please take a look at what Los Altos has learned from this. We do not want to have the city sued by some of these carriers. So hopefully you can strike the right balance in protecting residents from the harmful radiations that are expected from this 5G unit, but at the same time, provide adequate facilities to staff needs for these hybrid professionals working from here. Finally, I just want to add, it is a need to.
This is odd. So San, you're also blipping out. We're not getting any audio from you.
I think we're just making the case for striking the right balance here. So I'll stop there and yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Our remaining speaker on Zoom is Nori, and we don't have any further blue cards. Is that correct? Other than Jennifer Griffin?
Correct, Mayor.
Madam City Clerk. And did you receive any emails during this time?
No, I have not.
Okay, so we'll have Nori and then Jennifer. Nori, welcome.
Sorry, I'm mute. Why notification mail changed from 500 feet to 300 feet this time? And I thought it was 500 feet to all the resident. And the second question is, I wasn't organized yet. Another thing is placing door hanger. That is only for 100 feet resident. Why not 300 or 500 feet resident, same as a notification letter? And then another one is, I would like to ask Chad to keep the same date, period of time, 21 days after resident received the notification email, because that is counted the date of the letter was made, not when resident received. So already take a couple days, and a couple days we respond or study or research or talk to my neighbors. So even though it is longest date, it said that Cupertino had the longest comment period. Please keep 21 days. And another one is most small cell towers are Verizon. Why most are Verizon? Because permitted small cell tower are 93 Verizon and only 15 AT&T. And the activated are 31 Verizon, no AT&T. And it looks like Verizon is building many cell tower as possible they could get the light pole. And then even Verizon activated cell tower does not have the activation report. 31 Verizon activated small cell, but 11 tower does not have activation report. Did the city already approve without activation report, or they don't, or Verizon does not test the RF emission provide that activation report? And then
15 seconds.
Another question is, why small cell tower are not in the west side of Highway 85? All concentrate to the east side. Only 8 cell tower in the west because of the fiber optics code.
Thank you, Nori. And our next speaker is Jennifer Griffin, live. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you for the nice presentation. Was at the city council meetings when this first went floating by, and I'm kind of familiar with some of the issues Los Altos has been having. I'll tell you right now, the transition from 3G to 5G, or 3 to 4 to 5G, has been really rough. We just had to convert my mother's phone. She still had the 3G. Verizon was basically told us they just sent us another phone for her. She can't figure out how to use it. She's, a senior. She loved her Samsung, which she had was a 3G. I can't explain to her why her old phone doesn't work anymore. It's progress. My husband's actually got off of Verizon because he was having software problems with his phone. He's on a different carrier now. I've actually got my mother's phone with me right now because she can't figure out how to use it, and that's a Verizon phone. So the other thing, I'm just going to make a statement. I understand when we're going from, I think 3G was a range of tall cell towers that were spread around, particularly for Verizon around the Bay Area, in this area. Now we're going to a deployment of many small facilities around a city, on light poles, on telephone poles, God knows where else. And it is disruptive for the public. You have a lot of, I'm going to say right now, we have a slew of housing bills that are already disrupting our neighborhoods, cut down our trees, putting in fences. You're going to have subdivide a 4,000 square foot lot into 10 housing complexes. Are we going to be throwing the 5G or 4G mini towers on top of these new 8-story ADUs that are stuck in the people's backyard and spreading cancer problems around? Okay, we won't go there. But also too, last May, we went to Florida, all right? We went to Tampa Bay and had just been at St. Pete's. You had one heck of a hurricane that hit areas south of Tampa Bay that had not ever had a direct hit of a hurricane. I can tell you now, if they had hit Tampa, it would have been an absolute disaster. As it was, those areas that were south of Tampa were completely devastated. They lost any cell phone towers. So when you have Duke Energy was pulled down from Virginia and they were ready to go. I have several friends and family members in Florida, but when you have a disaster, what is our plan when we have a massive earthquake happening and we are going to lose all these many cell phone towers? I don't hear anybody talking about that. The aesthetics are very, very important. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, we're back to the dais at this time. We have some follow-up questions if my colleagues I have them for staff, and I'll go by a show of hands here. Currently, I don't have hands up on follow-ups. Now Councilmember Willie, followed by Councilmember Way. So we'll start with Councilmember Willie.
Yeah, a couple questions. So my first question is, on the one hand, Chad said they're proposing to increase the distance between cells from 500 to 700 feet. But the question I've got is, what data do you have from the supplier for the 500-foot distance? What data do you have from the supplier for the 750? What data is driving that distance? Why not 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 feet? What's the data? Thank you.
Okay, well, let's bring it back to Chad. So I think the question was directed at you, and so let's.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any specific data on this. This information is basically been pulled in from various conversations with RF engineers as well as with providers. My understanding is in a flat desert, these things can propagate up to a mile. But as soon as you are in a more dense situation or an urban situation where you have trees, houses, a lot of the newer frequencies being used for cellular propagation are obstructed by any kind of hard object, including the leaves of a tree. So again, not having any specific hard data on how, because each location is a different situation. You put one of these, next to a tree, it's not going to propagate that signal very well in the direction of the tree, but it could go in the other direction. The kind of rule of thumb is in an urban environment, depending on the frequency, you've got around 500 to 600 feet propagation. Again, that could be different depending on where these are being placed and what obstructions are in the way to interfere with those signals.
Any other further follow-ups?
Yeah, so we've heard over the last 4 years, I've heard from so many residents about the concerns, but it's still only a small portion of the overall community. But we've heard about their concerns. So I truly do believe that we need to actually be basing our decisions on real data. Sometimes we have to extrapolate a little bit. Sometimes we got to ask to go and get that data. But if we're making decisions based on, 750 is better than 500, I just don't see the science behind that. I'll correlate it to something like speed limits. The state sets speed limits, and that's based on reaction time and braking time and obstacles going around corners. They don't just arbitrarily say, this should be a 25 mile an hour zone and this should be a 50 mile an hour zone. It's inside a residential. Kids can come out between cars. Stopping distance, reaction time, bingo, that sets the speeds. So I'm a little bit disappointed that we are, great that we're going from 500 to 750, but we're doing it without some data that could in fact say that 1,000 or 1,200 is good. I'm not suggesting that we put any criteria that says the developer or the provider can't do a shorter distance. I think that as long as they then show us that at a particular location that the service doesn't work.
I'll just remind you, Councilmember Willie, since you've gone on for a while, that we're at questions at this point. So if you have commentary.
Well, I'm actually asking for, if you don't have that data, I think it should. Tonight's a study session. If you don't have that data, I think it should be presented. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember.
And Just to quickly respond to that, I hear you. We'll look to see what kind of data can be required for these applications, and we'll provide a response to that when we bring this item back. So thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Woolley. Thank you, Chad. And we'll go to Councilmember Way, followed by Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Way.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. This question is for Assistant Director Mosley and also maybe our City Attorney Jensen. I just opened the email this afternoon regarding the letter or the email that Verizon sent us from maybe their attorney's office, Mackenzie Alberton LLP. All the items that they raised, I don't think we incorporate into the staff probably didn't have time to incorporate or evaluate. So I would, the question is, do we need time to evaluate, and maybe Attorney Jensen needs to evaluate it and maybe provide that input to us next time, or, when we approve the ordinance.
And I can answer that. We did look at the letter. There were some good points in there. We will evaluate each of those items that were provided, and if we need to make adjustments accordingly based on federal regulations, we'll do that. I think additionally, we can try and provide responses to each of those items, bring back our responses to the input tonight at that future council meeting when we bring potentially an ordinance back.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go on to Councilmember Moore.
Okay. Thank you, Chad, for the report, particularly the visuals. I was wondering if you could bring back the images of the wood telephone poles to look at that, and then you had another image showing facilities strung on the upper wires. Okay, so could you describe from left to right what we're looking at, what represents a small cell, and we're allowed to comment on the aesthetics, so it's right. And so with regards to aesthetics, because this is a question time now, what are valid types of comments or complaints that could be made?
Go ahead. Yeah, Assistant Director.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
It's hard to share a screen and work on Zoom at the same time. Give me 1 second to pull this back up. There we go. Sorry about that. I think the best item to look at here. Did you see my screen with the photos?
Yes.
Yeah. This item here is probably the best one to kind of look at. It gives you a full picture. What's considered the small cell here is this equipment down here on the pole, which is very similar to what you see here. This is actually one of the more streamlined versions of a small cell on a wooden pole. It also includes this extension at the top, which typically extends these up anywhere of around 10 to 12 feet from the top of a utility pole. So you've got your typical 35 to 50 foot, I guess they're typically 50-foot utility poles. You're adding an additional 10 to 12 feet on that. These two on the left and on the right, honestly, these were kind of some first generation small cells. They're really clunky, and back in 2016, we did not want these on our poles because they look like college refrigerators strapped to the side of a pole. A lot of cities said the same thing, and then you saw this kind of more streamlined design where instead of having a big clunky thing stick out from the pole, they kind of broke it up into 4 parts and spread it further horizontally on the pole so it's closer. But all of this equipment here, which is kind of shown down here, as well as this extension, these are all part of a small cell on a utility pole.
Okay, so Chad, with regards to what would be useful commentary regarding the aesthetics, because I have some descriptive words for these items. So I'm wondering what for us to be providing for input would be useful, starting with this one, and then I wanted to look at the wires that you had.
Second. I mean, to a certain extent, we've been steering the providers away from these. Verizon wanted to put some of these in. We actually created a settlement agreement that kind of steers them back to city poles, which are the more streamlined version. With respect to any kind of facility that could be located on a utility pole, we'd be looking to try and minimize the offsets from the pole so that it would be kind of tucked in closer to the pole as opposed to sticking out so far. Additionally, I think there are certain volume requirements that would have to be applied to that. Again, we've been successful in steering these installations to our streetlight poles. We have master license agreements set up with various providers, which allow us to kind of focus them on what we believe are aesthetically superior options, and that would be our city streetlight facility, which kind of houses these things in that shroud at the top.
Okay, and through the mayor, we do have neighborhoods where there are limited streetlights, and so that all they have really are these telephone poles, and so I don't know if the residents would be aware that they could have a collection of boxes strung on their poles, which because they're somewhat unusual. Visually unusual, and there's a lot of shapes, objects that draw the eye. That they have a really big impact visually, and so we do have neighborhoods where this would be the only solution. Or what are you suggesting that particularly in a neighborhood which has all the lighting, for instance, that the residents want? They like the dark skies ordinance, for example, and they don't want to have more streetlights. Then what do you do for that neighborhood that only has the telephone poles? Are they essentially stuck with the collection of boxes on the pole?
Cupertino has been successful in having carriers install new streetlight poles to offset the streetlights that are on the wooden poles. So we've tried to place those new streetlight poles that space, according to our 150-foot spacing guidelines for streetlights. And then they have installed the small cells on a city streetlight pole, which again the city has indicated is aesthetically superior than the boxes on the side of the utility poles.
Okay, so that essentially a neighborhood that was wanting to continue and with the dark sky ordinance would basically be stuck with a street light they didn't want, or this option. And my other question was if we could please see the units which are
I think
strung
Chad
on the
wanted to
pole,
respond to your last comment. If you wanted to give him
I was just going to indicate that theoretically the FCC has given providers the right to put in a standalone pole to facilitate their needs. We've been trying to steer away from just random poles in the right of way. So there is that option as well. But I will pull up the strand mounted equipment. See, here we go. Here. Do you see my screen?
We do see it, yes. And what's the purpose of showing the Tier 7 strand-mounted equipment?
Why did I want to see this? Well, for aesthetics reasons. So with regards to the strand-mounted equipment, again, what kind of aesthetic comments, because that's where we were left that we could provide our commentary on. What types of comments would be beneficial? And where in your ordering of preference do these fall?
Yeah, and so again, this is similar to the utility poles, where basically we've been successful in steering providers away from these types of installations and focused them on, again, the aesthetically superior streetlights option. The strand mounted equipment is tier 7. This is our least preferred option. We don't want these big boxes kind of hanging from the wires. We do not think that looks good. And so we put this at the lowest tier. Tier 6, second lowest, are the wooden utility poles. And then from there, we're using street lights within the various residences. So we're trying to steer away from these less aesthetically pleasing options. Again, we've been successful in directing these things away from that. And when it comes to the aesthetics we can really allow, it would be more about volume as opposed to anything else. We may be able to have some shrouds, but there's, again, it's a box on wires, and you can put some shrouding on it. It's not going to make it look any better. It's going to make it a bigger box on the wires that may have a smooth surface.
Okay, thank you. And probably the last comment I have at this point is that there were a number of items in that attorney's letter that we were given on behalf of Verizon, I believe, which were aesthetic related. And so I just want to, I'm hearing that there are other people out there that are not happy with the aesthetics of particularly what you just showed for these various options. And I've been a California landscape painter for 30 years now, so I'm particularly sensitive to these visuals. But I think that if you poll many people, you're going to find that you'll have some similar opinions about the appearance, and those opinions will be equally strong. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Moore. Chris, you were turning on your microphone. Was there a comment you wanted to make?
Yes, I just wanted to point Councilmember Moore to the regulations, and 7A does have the locational preferences that we're recommending, where wooden utility poles and strand-mounted equipment are the lowest preferences. They can't be prohibited outright if there's no other option. And then in Section 8, there are specific aesthetic standards for both pole-mounted installations and strand-mounted where they're required, and those are really borrowed from kind of best practices regulations that have been developed in other jurisdictions, and so that's the derivation of those. So so if you're looking for how we're trying to impose some reasonable aesthetic requirements on those types of facilities, you can refer to those provisions of the regulations.
Okay, and through the mayor, thank you, Chris, and I hope that when you are reviewing that letter and providing some responses back, that you are able to hold firmly with your efforts so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So Chad, with regard to the ability to put a pole specifically in there just for this purpose, where does that fall in the priorities? Are we preferring that over the wooden telephone poles? I'm thinking about these rural neighborhoods, right, where you don't necessarily have light poles. Can you just kind of walk us through that kind of scenario where you have kind of a scarcity of light poles, and you do have telephone poles that are wooden? I mean, how does that kind of process work out when you're, working with a carrier who wants to put a facility in there, or a number of them? So
we've typically tried to steer them to new streetlight poles in areas where they've wanted to put these small wireless facilities on utility poles.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes 1 or 2 new streetlight poles to provide the same coverage, because a lot of these wooden utility poles, they are in the air, so they've got better visual, like they can reach out.
Okay.
So sometimes it'll take 2 or 3 streetlight poles to cover one of these, in all honesty, but we've basically steered them toward these shorter streetlight poles.
Okay, let me stop you there. So are there areas of our city right now where they cannot put those streetlight poles in, or is that not the landscape that we have right now with regard to streetlight poles?
So there are a couple of areas within the city that have established like a semi-rural designation.
Yes.
Where streetlight poles are not permitted. And in those areas, if there was a spot that was the only location that could be placed, we would have to probably work towards putting it on one of these wooden utility poles.
Okay, and so
With that stated, a lot of our semi-rural areas are fairly small, and we could typically find a street light outside of that area within 500 feet that we could potentially steer them to.
Okay, but you're not really prepared, I would assume at this point, to say that's true for every area that's semi-rural, that we could find a substitute.
I'm not prepared to say that that's the case for every exact location, but I think in most cases we could steer them to a street light pole. Okay,
So the core of my question had to do with these poles that the FCC empowers just for the purpose of these small cell towers, or I should small cell facilities. Are those prioritized in this proposal over the wooden poles, or how are they with regard to the wooden poles, before or after?
Are you talking about just the standalone pole?
Yes.
I don't necessarily know that I have those prioritized in our definitive list, and if you have a recommendation on where that should be prioritized.
No, I'm just trying to find out what your recommendation is, and why.
My recommendation would probably be slipping it in at like 5.
Okay, before the last 2 wooden poles.
Yeah,
Okay, so
I still think one of those are superior to these boxes on a pole, but
have we installed a single one of those types of poles in Cupertino yet?
We have not.
Have not, okay. Notification radiuses, you had a slide up there that looked like Palo Alto had 600 feet, whereas we were at 300 feet, I think it was. And there was a question or a couple of questions from a member of the public that was asking about notification vis-a-vis things like door hangers, right? I think she had mentioned it was 100 feet. Why not take it up to the 300 or 500 feet that we have? So let's just take this in order. Why not a uniform notification radius, and why not get it, on par with maximum notifications that we see out there in our peer cities?
Yeah, and so with respect to the door hangers, we typically require 100 feet, and those are really done just to kind of notify the adjacent residents who are really going to be impacted by the construction, people who may lose parking in front of their house for a day while construction activities happening, really just to notify those immediately impacted by construction activities. Okay. With respect to the 500 foot, we originally had a 300 foot notification. Council had requested in previous study sessions to look at enhancing that radius. And so we did enhance it to 500 feet, but it has come to my attention that we need to keep these notifications consistent with other noticing processes. And so much of the city's noticing for development projects and other permitting activities is 300 feet. So we need to bring that back to 300 feet to be consistent. That's an FCC requirement to be consistent with other permitting activities.
I see.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, the basic requirement is that the regulations be reasonable and non-discriminatory. So it's difficult to argue that 300 feet is what we use for land use permits generally. It's difficult to argue that you should have a larger radius for a 28 cubic foot box than you would for the largest possible building that you could build in the city. And so I think that gives us a margin of safety to stick with what we do for other land use permits.
Okay, I mean, short of increasing the notice radius for everything, which, do we run into other types of issues there if that's, what we're looking at?
I know that the land use noticing procedures have been changed over time. I don't know the details of that. I mean, that would be obviously something, that council could provide direction on.
Could we provide direction on it tonight?
No, that would be a future agenda item, Mayor.
Okay, got it. All right. So before we go to Councilmember Morgan on questions, I'm going to stop by Vice Mayor Chow since we haven't heard from Leung on questions. And so we're on questions. And so, and I'll check in with Councilmember Moore very briefly. Before we go to pure commentary, I'm going to ask that we bring forward a motion for further discussion. Vice Mayor Chow, did you have questions at this time?
Questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for the clarification. The door hanger is only before the construction and it's after the approval. And I want to ask, so the 20-day notification, that's in the proposed ordinance, right?
That's correct. We're not proposing any modification to the 21-day noticing period. We're continuing to do that. We've got a process for permitting that allows for that long notification period, and we can continue to do that. So yes, 21 days is staying the same.
Okay, but then we have no control how long it takes for the mail to arrive or not.
That's correct. It's typically 2 or 3 days. So it does take a little while. I would like to point out that we have the 21-day noticing period where permitting is halted. The city listens to every resident, even if they comment 30 days after. If there's something we can address, we work with the providers to try to address that. The 21 days just helps us to kind of focus on the input from that point in time before we move on. Came and commented on day 27. We're going to listen. We're going to try and address those comments.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, the staff, for actively listening to the residents and trying to address their concerns. I know this is tough. FCC have put down this rule that take away a lot of what the cities can do, but what we can do at least is to make sure people are notified and when this is near their home. So I think one concern people mentioned is that the letters from the providers look like regular ads because it comes from Verizon or come from AT&T. People throw them away. So do we, for other development projects, who send out this notification, the applicants or the city?
For development projects, the city sends out those notifications.
So why is this one not consistent with our standard practice?
And for these ones, we were trying to put that extra staffing effort on the providers in order to kind of free up staff time. Staff time it's a limited resource, and we're trying to do what we can to maximize our ability to address other items. If council wanted the city to send out these notices as opposed to the provider, we could look into seeing if that's an option.
So right now, for other development project, city sends out notice on a city letterhead. And that letter,
correct.
I wish there is a picture image of this kind of envelope. So at least it looks official, right?
Yeah, it's
So is
typically
there
just
any way to require a certain design of the envelope so that it looks similar to a city notice and the provider sends it, but at least it won't be discarded as an advertisement from Verizon?
We have, just for your information, we with the regulations, we are requiring that they print on the cover of the envelope in bold, noticeable letters that this is information regarding a wireless facility. This is a new requirement that we're proposing with these ordinance and regulations so that people can see right there in the cover, this is not junk mail. This is about a new wireless facility.
Okay, let me check in with the city attorney who was indicating that he wanted to make a comment.
Oh, yeah, no, so Chad hit on the comment that I wanted to make, that if you'll see that in section 4I of the regulations, that concern attempts to address the concern that the vice mayor raised. It said, you know, the envelope has to have new wireless facility information printed on the front. And then that was specifically added to address concerns that, you know, we had previously heard about this kind of communication being discarded as junk mail.
Anything else, Vice Mayor Chow?
So, and then another is for a regular development project, there is usually a big sign posted on the project site. So it's more visible for people beyond these letters. So how come there is again a disparity between regular development project and the small cell where we don't require the same size of sign, or at least bigger sign than the 8x11 right now?
That's correct. With the new regulations and ordinances, we're requiring the providers to post an 8.5x11 on the pole so that people can see that that pole is proposed. You know, with respect to a larger sign, we thought the 8.5x11 would be appropriate. A larger sign hung on a pole, we may need to have structural calculations done because you're adding a wind load to that pole. Typically, you want to have that sign up high enough so that you're not obstructing sight lines for vehicles. You know, if a kid were to run out on the road behind one of those signs, we want vehicles to be able to see pedestrians and what's going on at the road level. So we'd put that up at a higher level, higher elevation. Because it's a larger sign, there could be a wind load associated with that. So we may have to require structural calculations to have the sign placed. And this was one reason we went with a smaller sign, because we're trying to keep, you know, not overly burden the permitting process. We think 8.5x11 at a reasonable elevation would at least alert people. This is the pole we're talking about when it comes to that notice I got. It's this one here. It's got a sign. It's got this posting on it. I know what pole it is, and I think it would just help them to see that by having it there.
What the sign say? Does it have big letters saying what that sign is about, or it's sometimes these are very tiny letters? No one really know unless you go up and close, and it's still very hard to see when you're on the street.
So this requirement to post in the pole is going to be a new requirement if we proceed forward with this ordinance and regulations. And so if you have recommendations for that language, I'd love to hear it, and we can try and incorporate that.
Oh, okay. So sign on the pole is a new requirement.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And I think some residents asked the question. I think I know the answer, but I want to ask so you can answer it. Is why most of them are from Verizon, and why Verizon, this 31 of them do not have activation report.
And so I'll do my best to answer this. Right now, originally Verizon has been the most active. AT&T's been somewhat silent, doing a permit here and there. Verizon made a concerted effort to come in and build kind of a robust network. I think to a certain extent, Verizon's looking to expand their 5G home service, which is a home internet service. And as opposed to like Comcast, where you've got a physical cable coming to the house, they're hoping they can provide a competitive internet service by just providing this 5G signal. Of all of the permitted small cell or all the cell wireless facilities that Verizon's done, not all of them have their fiber backhaul yet. And they require fiber optic backhaul to provide the information that they transmit. And so they're installing the small cell, but if it doesn't have fiber backhaul, they haven't turned that on yet. And if they haven't turned it on, there's no RF to measure. So what we're doing is when they get that fiber backhaul and turn that on, that's when they go and measure it, and that's when it becomes an active site, and we get that activation report, and we put that on the web page. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I think you answered me when in our pre-meeting already. And I asked the question that whether they are paying the rental fee as soon as it's approved, even it's not activated. Maybe you can answer so for the public's benefit.
Correct. As soon as we issue the permit for these facilities, the rent begins. So if they put in this facility and they don't actually install the backhaul and activate the thing, for a year and a half, they've still paid rent for that year and a half.
Yeah, thank you. That's good to know. Last question is regarding new light poles. I think I according to right now it's not in the 7 tiers. I actually like that because that means if there is a better location that's in a commercial area, a provider could choose to install a new light pole in the tier 1 location when tier 2 might not have be favorable, right? So if we put that into tier 5, that actually remove that potential better alternative, right?
I think Mayor Paul was talking about a standalone pole with no streetlight on it, just a pole with a wireless facility, not a new streetlight. New streetlights are not necessarily in tier 5. We actually have, in certain cases, installed new streetlights in more preferred locations in order to pull a facility away from a less preferred location.
Oh yeah, I think we have done that like in the middle of a park, right?
Correct. We did one on Miller Avenue and a couple of other locations. We've been successful in pulling it away from less preferred locations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then another question is regarding this new light poles. Some people like to have brighter sky at night, but some people really prefer it to be darker. So do we require any neighborhood input when we install a new light? So that's one question. And then another is, if a neighborhood doesn't want to have too many street lights, what's the process for them to appeal to the city to remove a street light?
With respect to new streetlights, we typically will notify a neighborhood when we're putting them in. We do have the new dark sky ordinance, and we're working on an LED transition so that those streetlights can conform to our dark sky requirements. With respect to an appeal for a new streetlight, I'm not sure that I necessarily have an answer for that one at this point in time, but that could be something we'd look into.
I mean, appeal to remove a street light because they think it's too bright.
I think for the most part, we provide street lighting to enhance safety for pedestrians at night. And we've not really had a lot of requests for removal of streetlights. We have, in certain situations, installed shields or directed streetlights more downward to provide that visual enhancement for pedestrians and kind of keep that glare off of private residences. So we've done certain things to direct light better to ensure that we're providing safety and trying to meet the concerns that residents have regarding lighting on their property.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, that's all.
Okay. So Chad, can you define fiber? Was it backfill you said, or was it back something else?
Yeah, it's fiber backhaul. So
backhaul, yes.
These small cell facilities, the data that they transmit comes from fiber optics. So site has to have a fiber optic service trenched to the light, so that serves the data for the small cell, and they call that the fiber optic. Does that clarify?
Okay, and so that infrastructure, is that still a topic of conversation between one or more carriers and the city as to the city's potential usage of it?
So currently, there are various providers or carriers that are installing fiber optic. I know Crown Castle's doing a lot of fiber optic installation. AT&T did a large install a few years ago with their GigaFiber. Verizon's even doing some small projects, and so some of that fiber is being installed as we speak. Is that what you're asking?
No, what I'm asking is there a potential benefit to the city with regard to so much of this backhaul being installed? Because when this came around the first time, and I might be the only person on council that was here, there was discussion, or at least some kind of speculation that the city could be using this infrastructure for the benefit of the public as well. Is that still part of the set of conversations that you're having?
Yeah, so originally what we were looking to do was try and co-locate, for lack of a better word. When somebody came in and put in conduit, we were going to try and work with them to have a parallel conduit installed for the city. We were actually successful in a couple of situations having some parallel conduit installed for the city in early fiber optic expansion. And then, as seems to be the case with a lot of these things, the federal government stepped in and said we could no longer do that. Preempted our ability to require conduit be installed for us at that time.
That's lovely. Okay, Councilmember Moore, you had your hand raised. Did you want to propose a motion at this time so that we could have any further discussion if desired? Or do you have some remaining questions at this time?
I think I could put forward a motion.
Okay.
One of the things that there's some inconsistency between I believe it's between attachment C and the proposed ordinance, and it would be the proposed ordinance on PDF 147 that under Section 7 location standards. Item 2, locations within residential districts or on or along arterial or main streets. You need to strike or main streets. For item 3, locations within residential districts on or along major or minor collector streets. Major streets should be one line, and then the following line would be locations along minor collector streets. And then the next item would be locations within residential districts. And this is consistent, these changes would be consistent with your attachment, which references the general plan. So if you go to the general plan, figure LU2, community form diagram, that's where all these different streets are mapped out. And so they show where your boulevards, in parentheses, arterials are, your avenues, which are in parentheses, major collectors, your avenues, in parentheses, minor collectors. And I think people might want to actually see this map when it comes back to us, so they know what where each one of these streets are. So I would like to see Section 7 cleaned up in the way I just described it. And then PDF 173 of the packet, item 3C, I would like the least preferred item distance to be changed to 25 feet from 20 feet. So my motion would be to make the modifications as just described of the draft ordinance attachment A when it comes back, and also address the concerns based on the comments that you've heard tonight that were raised in the attorney's letter from Verizon, McKenzie and Albatron LLP, dated December 5th, 2022.
Okay, so you have 3 sets of modifications to the staff recommendation. I believe one was on page 147, you said, starting in section 7. One's on page 173. With regard to category 3, I believe it is 3C you're referencing. You want 20 feet to be changed to 25 feet. And then also with regard to a correspondence from a member of the private sector through their legal representative, you want the staff to go back and speak to some of the concerns raised there, evaluate it, and bring that back as part of the draft ordinance proposed. Is that a correct encapsulation?
Correct. There is, Mayor, there is one other location that and there could be more, where the 20 feet shows up, so that wherever those need to be altered, take the 20 and make it 25. There's a checklist I noticed, for instance, but I can't recall the reference
to make
page.
it conform with your request to increase the 25 feet. So that's part of your second request. Vice Mayor Chow, you have your hand raised. Did you want? Oh, I'm sorry, Chad. Did you have a comment on that, or?
I was just going to say I've got the inputs. We'll take that. We'll look at it and incorporate it as appropriate.
Okay, great. Vice Mayor Chow, did you want to second that motion for the purpose of further discussion at this time?
Yeah, sure. I hope to add a friendly amendment.
Okay, what's your friendly amendment?
And let me interrupt real quickly. I mean,
Sure, go ahead.
Tonight, all we're voting on is whether or not to proceed with an ordinance and regulations.
Right.
And from that, we're just taking your inputs, like the input that Councilmember Moore just gave me. We're going to evaluate this and incorporate it into the ordinance as appropriate. And if we can't, we'll provide a reason why. So I don't think there's any need to amend the action. We're just give us the input and we'll do what we can to incorporate it.
Understood. Well, thank you. Thank you, Chad. That is much appreciated, I'm sure. And just to kind of reiterate your point, I think, if you will, this would take it through the regular ordinance process, of course. But let's hear what Vice Mayor Chow has as a friendly amendment to see if it can be handled at this time. So, Vice Mayor Chow, what's your proposed friendly amendment?
So, I'd like to see. Thank you for adding signs on the poles. I would like to see options to be brought back to have bigger signs. If you could have 2 sheets of 8 by 11, and the top sheet have big letters on what this notice is, and the bottom sheet is more detailed. So there are options that you can make the sign more visible to be more in line with other development permit. I understand there are limitations for this particular permit because of light bulb. And then I hope to see images of the envelope when it's brought back, so I can know what it looks like and the public can know what to look for. And if the images could be posted on the 5G website, that would be even better, so we know what they are. And I hope that the city can really consider extending the notification in general to 500 feet. That was actually for other development projects. People have already said that. But I guess that should be proposed at the future agenda item, but I hope that's included in the meeting minutes for this item also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Mayor Chow. And Councilmember Moore, light pole notices, envelope images, and potential direction to increase notice radius to 500 feet. Are those items that you would be willing to add to your motion as a friendly amendment?
I just want to check in with the city attorney. Maybe I missed something, but I'm pretty sure we can't hang anything on our light poles and street lights. And
no, the notices are.
But for this, I'm not quite sure what this notice description is. Are they hanging this notice on the actual light pole?
Yeah, apparently an 8.5 by 11 to notice the public that.
And currently, you're not allowed to hang anything from that. So I'm just curious how we're getting around that.
Well, we'd be adopting an ordinance that both allows and requires the applicant to do that. So I think if the desire were to make the notices larger, I think that would require input from Public Works just to make sure that it was feasible and didn't cause any problems with our our light poles and other infrastructure.
All right, thank you. And through the mayor, yes, I accept the friendly amendment and within the parameters that we have laid out. Thank you.
Okay, and within the feasibility as, of course, vetted by our legal staff. But Vice Mayor, presumably you will accept as the seconder your own friendly amendment. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Councilmember Willie, you have your hand raised.
So mine would be another friendly amendment, and so I'm looking at the section 7B, which pertains to the spacing, you know, saying 500 feet shall be now 750 feet. But without actual data, I would like to actually see it larger than 750. Of course, more is better, but okay, where we're at now, I'd say a minimum of 1,000 feet, and not being something that's going to prevent the provider from being able to get a lesser distance, but he'd have to do some measurements and provide the data. And to me, that I really believe that, you know, the provider should welcome that, just like the auto manufacturers have to do safety tests, emission tests. It's part of the cost of doing business, and they're promoting a better product. They're promoting a more community-friendly 5G cell service rather than just plastering it. So that would be my friendly amendment. I'd like to see more, but I would settle on 1,000 feet.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Willie. Let's go back to the original movement. Councilmember Moore, are you amenable to the increase as requested by Councilmember Willie's friendly amendment for the 750-foot separation between these facilities to increase to 1,000 feet?
Okay, well, through the mayor, I have a question for Chris. So once we've provided our input and staff starts working on the ordinance and looking through the letter from the other attorneys, will probably be provided, I'm going to assume, some legal advice about what we've arrived at and at some point, right?
Yeah. So you have received a confidential memo from my office, but we will be reviewing the comments we received from Verizon. I suspect we will be discussing it with Verizon's counsel, and then there will be additional guidance provided before any ordinance comes back for a first reading.
Okay. So I'll accept that friendly amendment and understanding that we'll be receiving advice again about this. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Moore. I'll check in with your seconder on this motion. Vice Mayor Chow, will you accept this as the seconder of the motion?
So let me try and understand. So this is an amendment to say that we would like to consider a distance between small cells from the same vendor to be 1,000 feet and require justification to have a distance of 750 feet in the potential final ordinance. Is that we would like staff to study this possibility to bring it back?
Is that recitation, Councilmember Willie, correct, that Vice Mayor Chow just made?
I think it's sufficient, but I would just think that it could be more general. You know, if they want less than 1,000, whether it's 750, they might wind up saying, oops, we're right up against a huge 3-story, 4-story building, and maybe they'll say 500 feet. So I would just leave it pretty open that 1,000 is going to be the preference for our community's sake. And anything less, they simply need to go and do some measurements and come back and show us that 1,000 isn't strong enough signal.
Okay, well, thanks for the clarification, Councilmember Willie. And I just let me check in with the movement. Councilmember Moore, is that consistent with what you agreed to as the movement to accept as Councilmember Willie's friendly amendment?
I would like to check with staff if that language is something that they can work with, or is it too?
I was seeing a head nod from Chad when Councilmember Willie was making that description, but was that consistent with what staff is willing to deliver, or I'm sorry, able to accommodate?
Sorry, go ahead, Chad.
I was going to say, we're just taking input, and we're going to go back and review this and find out, what we can do, both basically legally on this. Maybe Chris can provide a better response, but we're taking this input in, and we'll see what we can do about it.
Sounds good. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that we will evaluate, both the technical aspects and then sort of, the legal aspects of what we can actually require, kinds of submissions we can actually require to substantiate that.
Okay,
so those
fair
are
enough.
Both issues that we'll have to look at more
Well,
carefully.
I think the issue is clearly on the record now. Let's bring it back to Vice Mayor Chow. Vice Mayor Chow, having had that clarification, are you willing now to second Councilmember Willie's friendly?
Yeah, I accept the amendment.
Okay, very good. I see a new hand raised from Councilmember Way, so we'll go to you first, Hung, followed by Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Paul. Just a clarification question. So the agenda says the council to provide a list of recommended modifications to the regulations listed in the staff report. So
Yes.
Are we making a motion to provide this list?
Yes, the motion had a core list. Vice Mayor Chow made a friendly amendment and so modified that core list. Councilmember Willie made another friendly amendment. And so, yes, that motion itself right now that's on the table has a list of these various items.
Okay, understood. So it's not like the staff have to come up with what we are motioning. It's just a list for them to recommend a list for them to work on, and they'll come back with it.
That's correct. These are follow-up tasks. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Way. And then we move on to Councilmember Moore. That was artifactual. Okay, so I don't see any further hands raised. We have a motion on the table. Madam City Clerk, will you please conduct a roll call vote?
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, folks. We are on to our last item that's enumerated of the evening. Before we get to that, let's take a brief break. I'll hold us to 11:03. That's less than 5 minutes. It says 10:58 right now, 10:59. And so let's stretch the legs, and we'll see you in approximately 4 minutes. Thanks. And we are going to start up again. We are on item number 14. The agenda item is a public hearing, and that public hearing is to consider approval of a proposed development that will include 41,268 square feet approximately of commercial space and 206 residential condominium units. And the common address is the location of 10145 North De Anza Boulevard and 10118 Bandley Drive. I see that our presenter from staff tonight is Jean Martyr, Senior Planner. And so, Jean, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. And let me just quickly share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes, it is visible.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Mayor Paul. Again, I'm John Martyr, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department, and I will try to make this presentation as brief as possible. So again, as Mayor Paul had already read, this is an application for the Marina Food site and for this mixed-use development. The applications include an addendum to the mitigated negative declaration that was approved back in 2016, as well as the development permit, architectural site approval, specing tentative map, and tree removal permit. As you can see, the project location is a combination of two separate sites. The Marina Foods Plaza site, which is a larger parcel, and the Mandarin Gourmet site, which is surrounded by a variety of uses, which include office uses, general commercial, and mid-density to low-density residential uses on the north, west, and northeast, respectively. And this site is located within the heart of the city specific plan, within the north crossroads node. This is a priority housing site, and in regards to the current general plan, it was allocated 200 units based on 85% capacity, and this came in as SB 330 application earlier this year. A little bit about the project data. This is, again, a mixed-use development comprising of 3 buildings, A, B, and C, with underground garage and a tree removal permit for 92 trees to be removed. And again, that's a map to merge those 2 parcels, the marina site as well as the Mandarin Gourmet site. Just for a frame of reference, as we discuss the project, here's a site plan. Building A is in the northeast, pretty much where the Mandarin Gourmet is located. Building B is on the north side of the Marina Plaza shopping center, while Building C is on the middle of the site, with Alves to the north, Banley to the west, Dan's at the east, and Stevens Creek to the south. It was a prior approval in 2016 that included 188 apartments, 22,000 square feet of commercial space, 122 room hotel, as well as a 5-year DA, which terminated on September 20th, 2021. So a quick comparison of the prior approval with the current project proposed. You see that it's almost double the amount of commercial with this current proposal. No hotel. Instead of 188 apartments, we have 206 condominiums. Instead of 16 very low income units, we have 36 median and moderate income units. The height's relatively the same, with a couple waivers, of which we'll discuss later for 2 of the buildings, and a little bit more of the building area. This is a density bonus project with waivers being requested, and because they are following the city's BMR manual, with 20% of the project being BMR, 10%, 18 units being moderate income, and 10% or 18 units being median income. They are allowed a 15% bonus of 27 units on top of the 179 base density, or 206 units. So again, they do qualify for waivers as they are density bonus project. Again, waivers are, again, exceptions to any objective standard that can physically preclude a development of the project at the density requested. So the first waiver is for the height of the structures. Those are for just 2 of the buildings, Building A and Building C. Building A is requesting to go to the 58 feet and 6 inches at the parapet or roof line, above the 45 feet that is allowed for the general plan. And Building C is 55 feet at the roof line, where Building B is at 44 feet. As you can see, here's the section of Buildings A and C. The hashed green shows the areas of the buildings which are above the 45-foot line, and the 45-foot line is displayed on that red line going through the section. The side setbacks in the heart of the city, specific plan. The bare minimum is 10 feet, or half the height of the building. As you can see, Building B again is the one that meets the ordinance by quite a bit, while Building A and Building C are asking for waivers. Here's the site plan showing where the building setback would encroach into the proposed buildings if they were to be adhered to. You can see that Building A is right there, and you can see that the hashed area shows the potential loss of units if the side setback were to be adhered to. And same thing with Building C. And the third and final is a residential common open space. Again, per the heart of the city, residential common open space is required by a simple formula of 150 square feet times the amount of units. So you can see that the proposed residential common open space is about 600 square feet, deficient from the required 30,900 square feet. Whereas a commercial common open space is about 13 times as much as required. So the justification from the applicant is that if the height waiver is accepted, 30 units would be, if the height limit were to be adhered to, 30 units would be lost. Same with the side setback waiver. Approximately 30 units would be lost combined between buildings A and C, as well as the height waiver. And the common open space, you could potentially lose 5 units if the applicant were to adhere to it. So findings for denial of a waiver or incentive or concession, the first that the incentive or concession would have an adverse impact on the real property listed in historic California Register of Historic Resources. It's not a historic resource. That the waiver or incentive concession would have a specific adverse impact on public health or safety or the physical environment, and there's no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid a specific adverse impact without running the risk of project unaffordable to low and moderate income households. And again, the addendum to the original mitigating negative declaration found that there are no significant impacts with this revised proposal from the one in 2016. And that the waiver instead of concession is contrary to state federal law, as stated in the staff report and on the record. Staff has found that that the waivers are not contrary to state or federal law. Our BRMR manual is very specific about unit comparability, as noted in the site. I'm sorry, in the project plan sets. The BMR units are dispersed throughout the 3 buildings, and on average, meet the same bedroom counts as well as gross area square footage as the market rate unit. I apologize. They are asking for a parking reduction in accordance with the city's density bonus ordinance. Even with the request for parking reduction, they are proposing more than what would be typically required with the parking reduction for the residential portion. And they are proposing almost, no, I shouldn't say almost twice as much, but they're proposing quite a bit more than what's required for the retail portion as well. For example, prior space is 166 spaces. They're providing 260. Tree removal and replacement. Again, for the 92 trees that they are removing, they are replacing them with 140 on site. With 48 offsite. They again are going above and beyond what the code requires, where the code only requires 122 24-inch boxes. They are replacing those amounts with 120 24-inch box, as well as 20 36-inch box trees. The vesting tentative map is a combination of the 2 parcels with a 206 condominiums, which we included with the final map. And each of in the vesting tentative map will have reciprocal easements between the areas. Well, architectural design, I will let the applicant speak more to this, but just a brief high-level overview of the architecture on the site. All 3 buildings match and are consistent with each other. As you see, there's a modern design, very angular, very neat design to these buildings, almost like they call it California contemporary design. With a mixture of materials, as if you went through the project plan set, you can see through the material boards what type of materials they were using. Very durable and high quality. This view, this 3D model is showing a view looking south on South Danza towards the intersection of Stevens Creek Boulevard and South Danza. This view is looking along the Alves, probably most likely from across a perspective from the Aloft Hotel. And this is the center square as shown on the site. This is the perspective within that. Environmental review, a mitigated negative declaration was approved by council in 2016. The city's consultant Placeworks completed an addendum for this in accordance with the secret guidelines section 15164. What they found was that the construction operation of the modified project would not result in any new impacts or increase in severity of previously identified significant impacts analyzed in the adopted MND. So again, because of the scope of this project being 2/3 residential as a mixed-use project, this does qualify for guidance and mandates under the Housing Accountability Act. It does limit the city's ability to deny or impose certain conditions on housing development when the project complies with applicable objective plan, zoning, and subdivision standards. The city may disapprove the project if the project will have specific adverse impact on public health or safety, unless the project is disapproved or approved upon the condition that the project be developed at a lower density. And again, we have found through the M&D addendum that there most likely would not be any significant impact, and that there's no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the adverse impact that exists. Again, M&D addendum does not show that there'll be any more significant impact with this project. Significant outreach was conducted by the applicant. And again, the applicants here that they can discuss more in general, but there were at least five specific outreach efforts to the community by the applicant. Planning Commission did recommend approval at a vote for 5-0 on November 10th, 2022. They did add conditions that the applicant present to City Council landscape palette that utilizes native trees, shrubs, and or ground cover. That condition 21 of the draft development permit resolution memorialized the applicant's proposal for a community room located on the ground floor of Building B to be open to 501c3 organizations that are registered specifically in the city of Cupertino, and that prior to issuance of building permits, the applicant shall implement best practices to manage indoor air pollution. There was a request that the applicant consider applying for general plan amendment to allow to add a floor in Building B to allow for additional affordable units, and they can discuss more that when they give their presentation. Conclusion, staff recommends approval of the project because the project and conditions of approval address concerns related to the proposed development and all the findings for approval of the proposed project consistent with chapters 1418, 1828, 56, 19156, and 19168 of the CMC to be made concerning the development's height, side setback, and common open space waivers. Evidence in the record demonstrated that the project met the standards for granting waivers under the state density bonus law. One quick modification that came up after the after the publishing of the staff report was to that condition 21 to further refine it. And that bullet regarding the community room should read: the community room located on the ground floor of Building B as designed and proposed by the applicant shall be open for the use by 501c3 organizations registered in the city of Cupertino. The underlined italicized portion is what we would like staff is recommending to be added to that condition of approval, provided, however, that this condition shall not prevent the homeowner association from establishing reasonable policies and procedures for the use of the room, thus giving the HOA in their CC&Rs more control of who they can allow to use that room. Next step is City Council's decision will be final unless reconsidered within 10 days of the decision. The applicant may apply for building permits at that time. This concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, John. And we have a presentation from the applicant now. I'm going to go ahead and remind everyone that we have a flow chart on the second page of our agenda that shows the process that we follow. We have the staff report. The applicant then has up to 10 minutes to provide their presentation. And then we open it up to members of the public with any comments or questions. We'll bring it back to the applicant for some responses if they wish to respond to members of the public, as well as council questions. We will close the hearing, and then council will make a decision upon this public hearing item. And so welcome, and I understand you are here to represent the applicant and provide your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Paul, Vice Mayor Chow, and council members. My name is Greg Endem. I was originally going to ask you for more time tonight to make my presentation, but I'm going to try to do it in less than 10. Great. Our team is here to answer any questions. Our land use attorney, Eric Ramakrishnan, is online on Zoom to answer any technical law questions. Jesse Markham, our landscape architect, is prepared to make a presentation on the landscape portion, but we thought in the interest of time, we would just wait and see if there's any questions from you, and he can respond at that time. So moving forward, the project tonight is different from our original approval in that it offers home ownership and ownership of the business units. That's one of the major changes. It also are larger units, because what we've found is we see empty nesters who want to stay in the community. They want to downsize from a 3,000 square foot house, but 1-bedroom units don't cut it. So you'll see in our proposal that we have 2 and 3 bedroom units with dens, larger up to 1,600 square feet. They give opportunities for the community to stay close by and still have home ownership. We've really strived to make the project eco-friendly. We're very close, and we're confident we'll be gold LEED certified by the time we apply for the building permit. Right now, we're 2 points short of that with silver, but many of the point system depends on your final building permit, and so we're looking to get to gold. We're also going to put in photovoltaic solar throughout the project on the roof that will lower energy usage and all the common area lighting. So we're very excited about that. And we have a lot of open space, and we'll talk about that as we go through this. John in his presentation already pointed out a number of the features different from our original proposal. We have 206 units as opposed to 188 in their ownership units. They're larger units, more BMR units, and an important factor, we have double the amount of retail here that we had from the original proposal. This is very close to the amount of retail on the site now. So we want to keep the retail component, keep that activity level, but still offer the residences. Just to benchmark where we're at, these are photos of the key intersections and ALVs. ALVs right now has no pedestrian activity whatsoever to speak of. And our proposal, which you'll see, will really activate ALVs as well as continue the impact from the other 2 streets. So this is what we're proposing. As John showed, we're looking south on De Anza or south on Banley. These are the 2 key corners. Looking from the Apple Cafe, and we had a great meeting with the Apple folks to present our project. And their first question was, what's it going to look like from our cafe? And they were very pleased with the view that you see here. And then we have the Paseo looking back the other way towards the Apple building on these 2 views on the lower part of the slide. The plaza, which is really the focal point for gathering for tenants. There'll be seating, places where all of the retail restaurants, for the most part, and we'll show that, have outdoor dining areas. So we can really have an active outside area, and the plaza kind of anchors this for the whole project in between the 3 buildings. I mentioned we were eco-friendly. We have 208 EV-ready charging spaces that are in the garage, and there'll be 54 spaces at street level for retail. We have overparked the bike parking to where we have more than what is required, both Class 1 and Class 2. As I mentioned, we have the photovoltaic solar, and we're going for the gold certification on the lead. And then we have an extensive green roof area to offset some of the stormwater treatment, which we can see later. This is a shot of the garage, just really going through all my green on the label is not exactly the green that's in the slides, but those are the EV charging spaces throughout the garage. They'll be EV ready. This is the ground floor of the retail, and we have a community room. Plus, we're going to design it in such a way that it's adjacent to one of the lobbies. You can slide the glass door, collapsible glass doors back, open that up. It'll be about 1,500 square feet. You can use it for art presentations. We got great feedback from the sister city groups to use there, or the Historical Society. So this is just one of the attributes we wanted to offer to the community. The spaces with the stars are the areas that are designated as potential restaurant spaces with outdoor seating. And then, we have more than required parking because we know that's an important factor to have a successful retail project. This just is a sample of one of the floors to show the disbursement of the BMR units throughout. Yellow is the market rate, green shows the moderate income in blue, and they are equally scattered throughout the entire project, and you see the sizes listed there for the various units. The density bonus, John really went through that. I would say that if you look at the first one where we're looking on the side setback, the adjacent property line is basically a concrete block wall and an entrance to the parking underground structure. So there's not a lot of impact occurring there because of the side setback. The other setback on building C is adjacent to parking area as well, commercial parking area. And this just again shows the units that we would lose if we were not granted those waivers. The open space, while we are just a little short on residential common area open space, overall we're offering 41% more than what is required by the code. And for a 5-acre project, we're offering 1.4 acres of total open space. So we've really focused in on green space throughout the project. This is the landscape portion. I'll just quickly highlight this. We talked about the trees. We're removing 94 non-native trees and replacing them with 184 native trees. Each of the center buildings have a courtyard with landscaping, areas for the residents to gather, bocce courts, these kind of amenities. These are just for the residents. This is really one level above the retail. The roofs have, buildings A and C have roof garden areas for the tenants to use, and the green area represents our green roof, stormwater, and just green area that we placed on each of the 3 buildings. Some of the treatments throughout the project, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because this is not my forte, but I do want to mention about our sister city and art program. We've worked with the 4 sister city groups, and we really want to focus on making this an art walk throughout the project. Naturally, the 2 corners at Banley and De Anza will have major focal pieces for artwork, but we have a budget of about 1.7 million, give or take, for our art contribution. And so in addition to those 2 corners, we want to scatter throughout the project focal points about the history of the sister city, as well as some artwork from each of the sister city somehow tied in. And so those can be with directory, you can wander through and really learn about those groups and associations and their history. This is just some of the plant palette. John did mention also we had extensive community outreach. We had 5 meetings. We mailed to over 2,000 residences. We had attendance at all 4 of the meetings, in addition to the sister city. And everybody was very supportive of like the idea of the community room. And we did receive, I think it's in your packet, about 15 letters of support from the public. This again talks about the sister city. I won't go through that because we're short of time. So really to close out, this is going to add 206 units to the city's housing stock, with 36 of those being BMR, with almost as much retail as we have today. Clearly an improvement to an unutilized corner in the city, offering the empty nesters a place to stay within the community. And we've mentioned the art and the culture that we're going to try to bring to the project. And we thank you for your consideration and answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg. And we will go to members of the public with comments at this time. And I see 2 hands raised in Zoom. They are from Lisa Warren and Peggy Griffin. And now we have Jean Bedord as well on Zoom. I have 2, thank you very much, Madam City Clerk, 2 blue cards for members of the public that are here from Ben Shai and Jennifer Griffin. And I'll remind everyone that if your hand is raised on Zoom, or if your blue card is submitted, or if you send an email to cityclerk@cupertino.org within the first 3 minutes, or while the first person is speaking, whatever's longer, we will go ahead and call on you for public comment here. On the Zoom function, I also have Dennis Cunningham now at this point. And so we'll start with Lisa Warren. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. So I'm basically in support of this project. I think it's better than the last one by far. And I commented during Planning Commission on a few things. Some of them were later explained by the team. And so that I don't need to repeat, but I have 2 that I think are really important. I'm glad that Planning Commission requested, and it was documented, that there be a better representation of using native plants and what that would look like. And there was a concern from myself and others about an oak tree, and I don't have the name of it, sorry, right now, it's left my brain, a specific oak tree that was going to be used, and that was questioned by a couple people. And as I remember it, the landscape architect said, he was using trees off the city's list, but I think the city's list has room for improvement. I've said that over and over, and I really wish we could address that. And I know there's been some trees added that I'm questioning in my own neighborhood that I see. So just make sure the trees are appropriate. And then the other thing, which is a big deal to me, is there should be the ability for the CC&Rs on this development to indicate a limited amount of units that could be for rent. They will be purchased units. So what that means is the HOAs could require a limited number of units that can be non-owner occupied. And I think that's really important. There's people, I guess I've heard recently that there's people that believe that's not necessary because people aren't going to spend this kind of money on a unit and then rent it out. And I can tell you, I see it weekly, that is not true. Many, many purchases of large dollar amounts are made, and the people who purchase never live in them, and in many cases never even saw them. So I think it's important to have the owner do what they can to make this really be owner occupied, because that's what we need, and not left vacant or just rented out. And during the PC meeting, they did indicate they would look into that. So they they got my message, and I hope that they're able to do, I don't know what all.
10 seconds.
Doable at some point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. I'll check in now. We don't have further hands raised on Zoom, and so that is the list there. Are there any further blue cards from the public and live, Madam City Clerk?
No, Mayor.
And did you receive any emails during this time?
No emails, Mayor.
No emails. Okay. So that will be our list. Again, I'll remind people, Peggy Griffin, Jean Bedord. I did have, so Dennis Cunningham is raised again in Zoom, Ben Shai, and then Jennifer Griffin live. Peggy, you're next. Welcome.
Good evening. I am in support of this project. I do, and I find a couple aspects refreshing. To have ownership of business units. So many of our businesses have had to leave Cupertino because the rent went up. And had they been able to own their unit, we might have still had those businesses. So I really am happy about that possibility. Following on Lisa's suggestion, I think that both the business units and the condominiums should require owner occupied, because this would prevent investors from buying them and then renting them out where the rent goes up every year. And also it prevents large organizations from gobbling up a large portion of the condominiums for their use, and then we don't have ownership and residents living in Cupertino. So I think that's a really important thing to put in. Otherwise, and if the oak is a coastal oak, it's horrible to have on a pedestrian walkway. In front of Lawson, there are 2 or 3 of these things, and they grow down and poke you in the eye when you walk. They just don't grow naturally up and out of the pedestrian walkway. So if it's that kind of oak, change it to something else. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Next, we have Jean Bedord. Welcome, Jean.
Good evening, Mayor Paul and council members. My name is Jean Bedord, and I'm a resident of Cupertino. I'm here to urge you to approve this application for the Marina Plaza project. I've attended the open houses for the project and had an opportunity to provide input for the design. This development is particularly senior friendly. These are single floor housing units without stairs, which makes them accessible for wheelchairs and walkers. The ground level retail will include restaurants and coffee shops, readily accessible to residents without requiring transportation, thus encouraging independence. In addition, Target is directly adjacent to the site, with Sprouts and other retail directly across Stevens Creek Boulevard. This project is also within walking distance of our local YMCA, which encourages senior fitness. In addition, the design includes bike-friendly transportation, including bike lockers. This housing fills a major gap in senior housing in Cupertino. Many of us live in large family homes, 3,000 square feet and larger, and would like to downsize. We're looking for 2 to 3 bedroom units. Seniors are not interested in 1-bedroom units after living in larger houses. We want to stay in the community, close to friends and medical providers. This project provides the housing we need and makes our big homes available to young families. This was a good project when it was approved in 2016. It has evolved into a better project. Please enthusiastically approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. If you could hold your applause, appreciate it. Our next speaker is Dennis Cunningham, and Dennis, you have 2 hands raised. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your first hand on Zoom and see if that works. And so not seeing you unmuting all, unmute your, and you're getting feedback.
I don't know the
Can you, we can hear something if that's.
I'll kill this one.
Well,
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, turn the volume down on your other device, I think is probably what you need to do.
I'm out of here.
Okay.
Okay, we weren't quite sure. This is fine. And,
Okay, let's do this. Maybe if you can try to unmute your other device to see if that might work a little bit better. Let's go ahead and try that. How does that work?
we go, unmute. Is that better?
That is
Can you
much
hear me
better,
now?
yes. Welcome.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. My name is Connie Cunningham, and I am a member of the Housing Commission, but speaking on my own on this. I agree with the previous speaker, Jean Bedore, who spoke very eloquently on the senior aspect of this particular development. I like it very much for many of the reasons given. Separately from the housing aspect of it, which like I said, I like very much. I have also spoken with the applicant in regards to the plant palette, and look forward to working with them on that. But even that, I see that the applicant has done a very, very fine job of working towards what the city would like to see as far as native plantings, and am encouraged that they are also working towards have satisfied the requirements for the bird safe and dark skies ordinances in town. So a very fine application, and I urge you to approve this. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Connie, as it were. I'll go to our first blue card. That is from Ben Shai. Welcome, Ben.
Mayor, council members, it's getting late. I try to speak very short. Okay, my name's Ben Shai. I live in Cupertino for 30 years. I also done my business in Cupertino for 30 years. Today I'm here, just want to support this project. I also sent in letters of support to Planning Commission. I'm very familiar with Marina Shopping Center, as I had my dental practice over there for 30 years. So I know the building is old, the facility is old. And today I'm glad to hear the proposed new development of the Marina Center. First, it will provide a lot of retail shops. Second, it will provide a lot of house for the community. Especially most important is they provide the below market housing. I realize there are about 36 units out of the 206 units. Those housing are affordable housing. For those households, they are on the long waiting list. So I'm looking forward to see the new change, the new appearance. I believe it will become very pretty and also beneficial to the city, to the community, to the retailer, and affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Our next and final speaker on this item is Jennifer Griffin. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, City Council. It was a very thorough presentation. You all did it as quickly as you could. I've been following this since the 2014, 2015, 2016. Lots of meetings about it. Marina is a very, very important grocery store complex. I really want to make sure that we don't lose the large retail grocery store. There are so many places in Cupertino where there are no grocery stores. And this looks like a really nice project. I appreciate all the effort that's gone into it. I'm just going to throw in there, everybody has been talking about senior housing. These are larger units. You're going to have people with children coming in there and pets. These are owner occupied. Where are the children going to play? What schools are they going to? How are they going to get to those schools? You've got major roads, Sunnyvale, Saratoga, and Stevens Creek. I'm a bit concerned about children going, nobody's talked about the school districts. I don't know the elementary, the high school I'm assuming might be Monte Vista, and the junior high would be probably, Kennedy or so. But where are these children to be going to school? I am not a fan of SB 330. I was very upset when Nancy Skinner got it passed in our legislation because it limited the amount of meetings that the public could have. So yes, okay, this is a 330 project, it appears to be, but it appears that there's adequate public input. I really think that we need to make sure that we keep the heights down. Yes, it's 10 feet, but it's 10 feet that we all see when we drive around the city. I'm going to tell you right now, this project looks very nice, but I am, especially since what they are putting up next to Winchester Mystery House on 280, I am so tired of these blocks of apartment complexes that are filling up the sky. You can't see the hills. You drive up 280 and all you see are these things that look like New York City. This project, I hate to say it, looks very Santana Row-ish. Let's try to break up some of the massing of these buildings. Why is there no second story, third story setbacks? Why are they all piled up along the perimeter of our roads? I don't think it's bad. I think that they have done a really, really good job of trying to break up these edifices. But I really think that we need to push some of this back onto the property.
Thank you,
and
Jennifer.
Please don't park in the Chase or Bank of America parking lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. At this point, we will give the applicant an opportunity to respond to any of the public comments if they care to utilize that. Okay, welcome back, Greg.
I'm going to let Jesse Markham speak to some of the landscape issues, and then I'll address a few of the other comments.
Okay, welcome,
Great.
Jesse.
Thank you. There was a couple comments on the oak trees. I'll note that the city has directed us which trees to plant on the streets. So we are simply going by what the city is asking us. We'll be happy to work with the city and have any other suggestions to modify tree species. So.
Okay. Some of the comments, the owner-occupied issue came up at the Planning Commission. It's been our experience and mine personally that most banks won't lend when you have high percentages of non-owner occupied in a project. I can let the city attorney opine on what we can be required to do or not do on that. We want to see it to be a successful project. We don't want to turn this into an investment project where it's just people buying to hold or to rent, but we want it to be serving families in the community. That's why we have retail condos as well, because that's something that you don't find very often. And we already have existing tenants who have said, I want to buy one of the spaces. So we've seen already interest in that, and we still aren't even out of the ground. We spoke about the coastal oaks and those issues. I I think I can just respond if there's any questions from.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. There's no
guys.
requirement that you
No.
respond to each. Okay, great. So let's open it up to City Council. Being cognizant of the time, I don't want to put unrealistic constraints here, but we're at 10 to midnight. And so what I would like to do is to open it up to questions if we have them, and then after questions to request a motion. I'm going to go ahead and call on Councilmember Moore, who has the first hand raised.
Okay. I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. On PDF 208 of the packet, there's a 25% contribution for Stevens Creek Boulevard in Bandley. And I was wondering why it's just a 25% contribution and not paying for the whole thing. That's one question. A comment, I appreciate the view from Apple Cafe, but they actually have a lot of trees in the way. So you're showing it more clearly than they would actually see. They have a lot of things obscuring the view. So yeah, so hats off. It's a good view of that. Let's see. There was a, on PDF 186, there's a statement about open space shortfall of 634 square feet, and I would like to have that clarified. And PDF 204, the open for use by the 501c3, I'm concerned about the hours and whatever method of determination would be made for which organization would have it. I think while I appreciate the offering in the plans, I think it's complicated to do, and there's multiple 501c3s, so I just don't know how you're going to plan for that, and how to make that more solid in the approval. And lastly, the Fine Arts and Culture Commission, we've renamed it and added a little to their purpose. And maybe this is a question for our city attorney. Because we have like a main intersection that will have some art approved for it, and at $1.7 million and having such a visible location, I'm wondering if there's some way we could have the final approval brought to City Council for the intersection, if it is just on De Anza Boulevard, but I'd like to, if there's some way that we can see it, because it's very expensive. And we can leave the Fine Arts and Cultural Commission to make the decisions on the internal parts of the project, but the more public-facing ones, I was wondering if there's some way we could have a say in that. Okay, so I hope someone was able to collect all those questions. I can repeat them if I need to.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore. I can attempt to answer a few of them. In terms of, through the mayor, excuse me.
Yep.
In terms of the contribution for the Bandley upgrades, we do have Assistant Director of Public Works, Chad Mosley, here that can probably clarify more better than I can. The shortfall of the common open space for that's one of the waivers that they're asking for. The applicant is requesting a waiver for that. That was the residential common open space requirement that's in the heart of the city specific plan. That's the 150 per unit. So one of the justifications for that waiver, as we discussed in the presentation and staff report, was that there's a potential loss of 5 units if they were to adhere strictly to that open space requirement. In terms of the art piece, maybe the city attorney can weigh in on this one. I'm assuming that the city council could have a preference for a location for art pieces as a condition of approval. I don't know if that's within the purview of the city council for this. But I mean, that's a suggestion that I would make if there is something that you would like to see as part of that.
Okay, thank you, John. Let's go on to Chad for, I guess, the cost of the intersection inquiry.
Yeah, just a brief information on that. The Marina project is located in the northeast quadrant of that intersection, so they kind of front 25% of that intersection. And additionally, because of their trip counts, this is a voluntary contribution. And we asked them if they could help provide some money to help upgrade that intersection. They said, sure, we'll cover 25%.
Okay, and then I'm trying to get to your questions here, Councilmember Moore, before we get back to you. So with regard to the determination of how the space is going to be used that is indicated to be allocated for nonprofit usage in terms of which nonprofits and the hours, can anyone speak to that? And I'm sorry, Chris,
Yeah.
are you
Yeah,
indicating that you want to
I
make
can
a
speak
comment?
to that,
Yes.
Mayor. Yeah, thank you. So I mean, the condition of approval is relatively specific. It says it has to be, Cupertino-based 501c3 organizations that rent the room. The requested modification would make it clear that the applicant can impose reasonable time, place, manner restrictions on the use of the room, which is similar to what the city would do with its own meeting rooms for allowing public access.
I'm sorry, what requested modification are you referring to?
The requested modification that I believe was one of the last slides in Gian's presentation.
Okay.
That basically incorporates language making clear that they can impose, the homeowners association can impose reasonable conditions on the use of the room. I think that's an appropriate level of detail for the city, because I think if we got into specifying who could use the room and when they could use the room, I think it would potentially raise First Amendment concerns that I don't think we would necessarily want to raise. And then with respect to the Fine Arts Commission, the Fine Arts Commission is approval authority for the public art. If there are any recommendations council wishes to make at this time, I think that would be within the scope of what's agendized today.
Okay. All right. So following up on the last point, any decision made by the Fine Arts Commission, even though it is codified, that is reviewable, though, correct? By the
It's
city council.
appealable.
It's appellable.
Yes.
So if someone wanted to appeal it, that would ultimately make its way to the city council, if I'm remembering the code correctly.
That's correct. It's appealable to the city council.
Okay. All right. All right. We'll go back to Councilmember Moore, but again, keeping in mind the time, I'd like to be able to give other people follow-ups as well. Councilmember Moore, did you have follow-ons at this time?
My questions are resolved. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go on to Councilmember Willie.
Great. I think not having many questions is a real good sign, so I don't have many questions. I think they're best helped by Gian in the sense that the 3D renderings that he has at the end of his PowerPoint are the same ones that are in the developers. And so if we could start there, if John could bring up like that first one, architectural design.
It's up.
Yeah, and so more or less, I'm going to be looking at the amount of setback and conceivably the building plane. And so if you just quickly glance, well, on this one, it kind of looks like from this view, it's got like the 35-foot of setback there. I'm not sure if John can answer that in this view.
Yes, that's correct. 35 feet from the curb.
And so from a building plane standpoint, well, they're asking for the waiver, and so that's for the upper floor per your previous drawings. Do the first to fourth floors all fit, in the building plane requirements?
So within the crossroads node of the heart of the city specific plan, there is no, well, actually, I'm sorry, within the general plan as well, there's no building plan requirement.
Okay. So now, just maybe real quick, go to the next picture so that we can then have that in our memory. Yeah, there you go. Same type thing, pretty much straight up at the sidewalk, but it looks like about the 35-foot foot. Now, if you could go back to the first plan view in your PowerPoint, the one that said Building A, Building B, Building C, but before you put the Building A, B, and C on the picture on top of it. There you go, yeah. So now the green area there is, I think, where we're talking about, that it's got, wow, a good exterior 35-foot setback on 3 of those sides. Am I correct there?
Correct.
And then what I'm trying to understand here is the purple area versus the gray area. You know, it looks like the gray area is the surface parking, but is there really that much, or is that building height and purple buildings, the retail around it? I'm not quite sure how this picture is describing the images that we just previously saw. If maybe with your pencil you could show, you know, it looks like it's all parking with very little building on each of those 3 A, B, C areas.
Sure. So what we have is almost, I guess you call it a podium / wrap type of buildings, where you have the parking in the middle of the building. And this is the first level of the site plan. So above this level, for the starting the second floor, you would have the common open space above this parking. You know, where you see this right here would be, this parking will be masked by some type of decorative wall so you wouldn't see the parking at all on this first level. Building B does probably a better job of surrounding the whole bottom floor with retail here. And then Building C, similar to Building A, you have a podium type of parking where these look exposed, these walls over here. Can you see my cursor, by the way, council member?
Well, you're heading definitely in the right direction.
Yeah.
So you're saying that this is more or less the lower first or second floor. And so then I guess to answer my question, the perimeter of each of these 3 is really complete building up above the second floor. So 3, 4, 5, and 3, 4, and 5th on the other 2 are all entirely apartment units. So then the question, or the view that was kind of showing the inner quad kind of area, can you point out where that would be on this, or is that at an elevated, you know, above the podium?
The plaza with the
plaza.
Okay, that'll be right here.
Okay, so one plaza area there, and ground floor walkable. In fact, is there even a ground floor walkable area between these 3 structures, then, if you will? And I'll just say each one is a complete structure, and not really looking like that in this view, but 3 structures. So more or less that's my questions, and so then I'll be, I think, finished until we come back with our comments.
Okay. And Jean, did you want to follow on the last part of Councilmember Willie's questions?
Yes. Repeat the last part, Councilmember Willie.
I think he made a comment about the walkability between buildings. I think is essentially what it was.
So down at the surface level, you know, what we were kind of seeing with the plaza, that surface level is walkable throughout the 3 building complex, welcoming people to kind of walk, access the retail, and you know, intermingle with people and stuff.
Absolutely. And not only that, you know, all these, I mean, it has to follow federal laws in terms of ADA. You know, the Americans with Accessibilities Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, excuse me. So this whole connections between the buildings have to be accessible for those with disabilities. So on top of being, walkable for pedestrians as well.
Okay, thank you. We have Vice Mayor Chow next, and that's followed by Councilmember Wei. And I'll do a check. We're at 12:05 right now. I'll go by, individually checking in with council members. Are we all okay with adding another 15 minutes towards my stated midnight goal? Okay, so I see Councilmember Wei nodding the head. Councilmember Wei, Willie, Councilmember Moore, and Vice Mayor Chow. Okay, so let's go ahead and check in with Vice Mayor Chow. Vice Mayor Chow, you have questions at this time?
Yeah. So, I think first I should disclose that I have met with the consultant Amy Chen for this project, and she indicated at the time she registered as lobbyist for the city. And I think for this project, it was a few months ago, I saw some preliminary plan. And yeah, so there are just many things about the project is good, so I won't spend time to enumerate that. So I'll start with some questions. So I don't see, I heard that the business will be ownership, but I couldn't find any mention of that in the development permit or the architect site approval. How is that phrased? That some business or all the business units will be condo business units?
So with regard to the retail condos, I'm sorry, was that Jean? Go ahead.
Through the mayor, if you have a comment to make, or I can respond after your comment.
No, I was just reiterating the question. So go ahead, please.
Oh yeah. So yes, there wasn't mentioned in the staff report, but I do believe that the applicant is requesting that the retail units are also ownership as well in a condominium fashion.
So is that reflected in the tentative map that they will be subdivided, or where can I find that as a condition of approval or something?
Currently, there is no description in the tentative map that for the commercial condominium.
I believe that the counsel for the applicant has a hand raised. So let me go ahead and call on Eric. Did you want to speak to this question, Eric?
Yes, I can. So, I mean, the way that this is handled legally is that you're being asked to approve a subdivision map for condo purposes, including commercial condo purposes. And then the next legal step would be for the applicant to prepare what will be a recorded condo plan, and that will allow the individual units to be sold separately. But that's a separate step from where we're at right now, process-wise. But that is the applicant's intent, and that's why the applicant is trying to get the property subdivided for condo purposes, so that the applicant can do that.
And we have a speaker at the dais right now. Greg, did you want to follow up?
Yeah,
on
just
that?
a comment. In the project description, which was in your packet, it does reference retail condos as well as condominium, residential condominiums. So it was noted there as well as to Eric's comment.
Okay.
So I really like that the business is condo units, but so sounds like there is not really a binding language in the conditions of approval right now. Right now, it's just stated as an intent, right? It could change, basically.
Vice Mayor Chow, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. So as I understand, this is part of the project description. So the applicant proposed to subdivide the entire project to allow for condominium of the retail, including residential. There's no need to include that as a condition of approval. That's part of the project.
Okay, but project description usually is not binding.
It's part of the plans.
And I see
Yeah,
City
okay.
Attorney Jensen, did you want to speak
Yeah.
to that point?
Yeah, so the tentative map that's council is approving does not at this time have condominium retail condominiums subdivided. That does not preclude a future subdivision to create retail condominiums, which the applicant has stated that they intend to do, and we will figure out what process needs to be done to do that at that time. But that's not what's before the council tonight.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess what Vice Mayor Chow is really kind of alluding to is what enforcement do we have to go ahead and ensure that these, become condoized?
I mean, situation could change, and then maybe next month someone would want to purchase the entire, all the condo units as one owner, and then do they need to come back to the council for approval for that?
Well, it wouldn't matter whether it were subdivided or not. Somebody could purchase all the units as one owner. We can't restrict the developer from selling, all or part of the project.
But the same thing as for residential condo, right? But so there is nothing really binding about.
That's correct. The fact that the developer is recording a residential condo map does not necessarily mean that the developer intends to sell all the units separately. But that's the business model that they've stated that they're pursuing here. And so, I mean, we don't. At least I don't have any reason to think that that's not correct.
Okay, that's fine. So what's the duration of the development agreement? So the last one was 5 years, but I remember for Hampton, it was 15 years, so.
It's 10.
There is no development agreement for this project. This is just an approval of the entitlements that are before council.
So what's the approval will be valid for how long?
I believe it's
2 years.
Yeah, thank you, John.
2 years.
Only 2 years? So if they don't build within 2 years, this approval is
Well, if they don't actively
Buyers?
pursue building permits in 2 years, so they don't have to build within 2 years, they just have to apply for building permits within the 2 years.
that seems to be shorter than it. How long was it for Westport?
Same.
The same also, but I thought for Hampton it was like 15 years.
Well, they applied for a development agreement.
Oh, so that's longer. Without that, it's the standard is 2 years.
Correct.
Okay, so we hope that they'll expedite the process. Okay, and so how about the question for school district?
So for elementary schools, I believe it's Garden Gate that that school age students would go to, and for high schools, I'm embarrassed. I don't know. I would think it's not Fremont. It could be Homestead, I believe. It wouldn't be Cupertino High or maybe Monte Vista. I apologize. I don't know that specifically which high school.
Okay, the middle school likely is Lawson, I think.
Vice Mayor Chow, we can follow up with the school district to clarify.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. And so I think the planning commission is recommending a potential of adding one extra floor for building B, so it can accommodate more affordable units. Could the applicant possibly comment on that? Is that a possibility?
Right. We have Greg back at the lectern.
Yes, at the Plan Commission that was brought up, and we have had initial internal discussions. We think that's a very positive step, but we need to do some more analysis and then bring it back and talk to staff about how we would accomplish that. I just know off the top of my head, we would have a possibility of about 28 more units to add if we add the additional floor, but that would further exacerbate the common area open space requirement to some degree, so we would be asking for some waivers on that score. But bottom line is very positive possibility, and we want to pursue that once we get through tonight.
Okay, we're at 12:15.
much.
I'm going to go ahead and
Yeah.
check in with council with regard to another 15 minutes. Vice Mayor Chow, are you okay with prolonging this another 15?
Yeah.
Councilmember Willie? Nod. Councilmember Moore? Councilmember Way? Okay, nods. Okay. Please proceed and keep in mind our time constraints. I'm trying to be
Yeah.
fair to everyone with regard to questions,
So,
and you're kind of pushing the limit of how long everyone else had.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I would like to see also if there is a way that the public art could come back to the council, because this is a pretty significant amount. And then past experience shows that usually one option is presented to the Fine Arts or Art Culture Commission, and there are no options. And I hope that this could be a little more engagement public process for $1.5 million of public art. Especially this would involve sister city representing our history and the cities. That would be if we could find a way. And I really like the project, and this 35 acres per 35 units per acre is the current density in the housing element, and then they are applying density bonus. I would like to see a similar project in Bob Road, so that the employees, high school students, the residents there could benefit from this type of development. Thank you.
Councilmember Way?
Just a couple of really quick clarifications. All the, this is a new development, so the ordinances we have, the all-electric building and the dark sky work safety ordinances, those will all be observed, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Willie, do you have a follow-up question at this time?
Yeah, I had one question that I had forgotten. So again, back to Gian. He had the one slide that said density bonus waiver, and then again it showed a top view and A and C about the side setbacks. And on the previous slide it said, 28 feet being reduced to 10 feet, I think. And if I could just ask and make sure I'm understanding.
Yes, you understand that correctly.
But if you could throw that picture up there, because I think it's important to convey, what I think we as city council should be looking for when we're faced with things that aren't truly in line with the general plan. Make sure that we ask the pertinent questions for the community's sake. If you're able to.
Should be slide 14, it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So only building A, well, when you go to the next one, but don't go there yet. So building A was the 10 feet, and then building C, then just going from 27 to 22 feet?
Correct.
Okay, so then when you go to the page, to the next page, and again, what I'm trying to get at here is making sure that we're asking the questions that the community would be looking for. Well, gee whiz, they're not going to have the setbacks, or they're going to be taller than expected. And so I think what I was hearing originally is in the upper one there, where there's the larger sections, that those are actually up, A. So those are actually up against a wall on the adjacent property?
Correct. Wall and that part of the property is just not just, but it's a parking garage.
Okay.
Underground, yeah.
For the adjacent property, it's a parking garage?
Subterranean. Yeah.
Subterranean. How high does that wall protrude? We know that this structure A is going to be 5 stories?
Correct.
So when we say it's bordering a wall, but how high, do you know how high the wall is that it borders?
I could imagine it's probably less than 8 feet.
Oh, yeah, okay. And so to me, that's really, really important for the community to understand that, wow, yeah, it's up against the wall. And so the setback at that point, what is the setback for building A on that side? I really like the other sides, the 35 feet, great. And that kind of reduces the anxiety, but still we should have a number there. So that setback there for A is...
Is 10 feet. So the hashed area is the side of the building where the side setback is 10 feet.
Okay, and so now the lower one, which is going to be a building C, and if you can describe, oh, so it was A that was the 10 feet that was, and that was my main focus, and so then the other one is a much smaller, going from 27 and a half to 22 and a half setback. So yeah, livable, I think. And so again, the main point, I wouldn't want us to get through this, approve all this, and having missed some of the important things for the community's sake, that we really should be looking at anything that varies from the so-called general plan, which the city knows is that represents what we hope the city conforms to by all these projects. And when it doesn't, we should identify and make sure. So great. So I'm just on to comments at that point.
I'm going to ask for a motion before we go on to comments. So let's go ahead and set that forth. Vice Mayor Chow, did you want to bring forward a motion at this time?
Yeah, happy to move for the staff recommendation for the item.
Okay, Vice Mayor Chow moves the recommended actions for the adoption of the 4 resolutions, 22-146 through 149. Is there a second to this motion? I see Councilmember Way and Vice Mayor, well, not Vice Mayor, but Councilmember Willie. Let's check in with Councilmember Way. Did you want to second the motion? You put your hand down just now. Did you?
I'll let John second it.
Okay, Councilmember Willie, would you like to second this motion?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Councilman Way. Yes, I'm happy to second this one, and I'll say why in comments.
Okay, great. And thank you, Councilmember Way. Very gracious of you. So we have a motion and a second on the table, and we have Vice Mayor Chow and Councilmember Willie with hands raised. Vice Mayor Chow.
Okay, so for comment, I think this is really, really a nice project with a lot of great features on extra bike parking, and it's just EV charge, plenty of EV chargers. And then the community room, and then the art feature to introduce the sister city history and characteristics. I'm really looking forward to this project. I know some people are concerned about height. I think in this location, 60 feet makes sense, even though it's beyond the current general plan 45 feet. And I'm a little concerned about setback. I wish the setback could be better, but overall, it's a great project. I have some small request that's I would like to kindly ask. It's not part of the motion that I hope to see pollinating and insect gardens so we can improve biodiversity. And I don't know if there are any water features planned. I hope that the site will have water features throughout the sites. And I wonder if there are space for a fenced dog park, because I think many seniors would probably like to own a pet as companion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor Chow. Next, we have Councilmember Willie.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And so I concur with Vice Mayor. I think this really is a good project. The comments that I think are important, and I'll start with, we have to realize density is definitely here for going forward. That being said, I think there really are ways to accommodate the density and yet still retain as much of the look and feel of and character of the community. And I think this project has really tried to do that. From the renderings that we've seen and the questions that we've asked, I really do appreciate how the owner, the developer have really, I feel, focused more on a project that fits the community as opposed to just trying to maximize the profits at the expense of the community. And so for that, I really want that message to, I hope, be a living legacy that staff will be trying to communicate that to future developers, so that we get more of what fits with the community. I am happy about the amount of retail. If we do it as a percentage of the housing, it really actually is more than what Valco is going to wind up with, per my calculations. The amount of parking that is available, yes. As much as we hear that we're going to get away from personal transportation, I just don't see that. We really are a very mobile society, and so the parking, when we talk about adding an extra floor, another 28 units, while that does affect the open space, it will also affect the parking. Where are the vehicles for those units going to be residing? The fact that there's not office on this, to me, really, really is an important aspect. We know that while jobs are important, the office component is what really hurts our housing and creates more of a housing shortage, more well-paid workers to fight for the limited housing. And so, again, I really hope that message goes forward for future projects. And then the last comment that I'll make is kind of about the first one, and that is trying to do what you can to maintain the character of the city. And with that regard, yes, the higher densities, the more height, the reduced setbacks, the building planes, but trying as hard as you can to adhere to those characters that really do make this community what it is. And with that being said, thank you for bringing us a good project. I look forward to seeing this when it's part of our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Willie. Next, we have Councilmember Moore.
Okay, I'm going to keep this super brief. So I want to echo the previous comments, and I really appreciate this project. I like that you're looking into having the ownership business units. I like the solar on the roof, the EV chargers that you're working on, the BMR dispersal. We just don't see that, and it's just an absolute joy to see this in this project, and that you worked on retail retention. Yeah, I think I'll leave it with that. I look forward to seeing what art you have. You've got a big budget to work with, and you know that we're concerned about how it's going to look from De Anza, and I like the exterior design as well. I think it's going to be a pretty exciting project. So,
okay, thank you, Councilmember Moore. So, Vice Mayor Chow, before I go back to y'all, I'll check in briefly with Councilmember White. Councilmember White, did you have any comments that you wanted to share?
No, it is a very, very good project.
Okay, great. Yeah, Vice Mayor Chow, did you want a follow-on comment?
Final comments, I want to thank the staff. This is the staff report. The presentation is so well prepared, and you compared the previous proposal versus the current one, the general plan standard versus the proposed one. It's very easy to read. And then I especially like to thank the staff for marking the density bonus units, and then the line that goes beyond the limit. I requested for those for Westport, and it wasn't provided. And I think this time the staff did follow the municipal code and ask for all this in order to justify the increased height. So I really thank the staff for doing all this, make this a really complete presentation. Thank you for providing all the information.
Great. Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Chow. And Councilmember Moore, I noticed your hand is raised. Again, did you want to make a follow-on comment?
Yeah, there was one part that I forgot to mention. In the packet, there were so many pages of your outreach that you had done, and I don't know that we've seen that before, but I really appreciated it, and I was reading through, and I found it very interesting, and I also felt a little sad because you'd made so much effort and so few people seemed to show up, but that happens. All right, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Very briefly, I want to thank the applicant for working very well with the community and with the council on this. I think out of all the projects that we're looking to entitle in the last several years, yours impressed me the most in terms of the sincerity of the interaction and the responsiveness to the various needs of the community. So I thought that was very excellent. I think it's a good project. I want to make note very briefly that Cupertino entitled several projects for its current housing element, and I am deeply pleased to be able to be considering this last one for a set of entitlements, and taking the 206 units here, adding them to the 600 over at the Irvine Company's Hamptons project, and the 200 and plus, I think it's 270 something over at the Oaks Shopping Center. Someone correct me if I'm not quite getting the precise number. That gets us well over our requirement of entitlement for this housing element. But then, of course, you have the Valco site, which has 2,402 units and is originally our hedge of 400. So I'm very pleased to be able to work with this applicant to deliver us to that final piece of the housing element. And irrespective of what else you hear with regard to Cupertino's reputation, the fact of the matter is we entitled sites in good faith, and we've been working throughout this process and this set of years with the applicants to make sure that we have solid projects. And for all the reasons that our colleagues have articulated here, we have a lot of positive things prospectively on this, and that is why I will be supporting the motion that is on the table. So thank you very much, and we will go ahead and take a roll call vote on this item. Madam City Clerk.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Aye.
Mayor Paul?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much, Madam City Clerk. We are now at 12:32. I will go ahead and ask for leave for another few minutes from my colleagues. Vice Mayor Chow, are you okay with that? To finish off our council and staff comments.
Yeah.
And we'll just ask everyone to be brief. If so, Councilmember Willie, are you all right? And Councilmember Moore, thumbs up. And Councilmember Way, yes. And I'm all right with that as well. So let's go to council and staff comments and future agenda items. Madam City Clerk, did you have any staff comments at this time?
No, Mayor.
No, not Madam City. I'm looking at the city man. I'm sorry.
It's all right. No, Mayor Paul. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Let's go to any council comments or future agenda items. Do we have any hands raised? Okay. Well, I actually do. I'm going to go ahead. I took the opportunity to write down my request here. So this will be my last future agenda item, and I'll ask for a second because although as mayor I would have the ability to place something on a future agenda, this is my last regularly scheduled meeting, and I don't plan to call any special meetings in this regard. So I'd like to ask for a second for staff to return to council with recommendations regarding shelter solutions for the unhoused. In particular, I would like staff to return for a study session asking for input from council on the factors affecting whether the city of Cupertino should declare a shelter crisis under Government Code Section 8698.2. This study session would also include this and other options the city has to ensure the creation of temporary shelters and the funding for ongoing supportive services for the people in these temporary shelters for up to 80 individual units within our city. State Government Code Section 8698.2 allows for funding opportunities in this regard if a jurisdiction declares a shelter crisis. With regard to the number of units at a location, there may turn out to be a different optimal number, and that should certainly be one focus of the study session. But from what I have learned, a number around 80 units might optimize the cost efficiencies with respect to ongoing supportive services. I'm specifically asking for an examination on shelters that are individualized so that people have a sense of safety and are more likely to accept the shelter option when presented with one. My hope is that by socializing and integrating these units within a given area, we create an example for how to approach the issue, one that can be examined and replicated by other jurisdictions, such that the scope of the housing crisis, on its most stark and real terms, can be diminished and eventually eliminated. I'm simply asking for a second from my fellow council members, and I do see your hand raised, Councilmember Willie. However, you do not represent continuity like myself, and so I will ask another one of our colleagues. Councilmember Moore, you have your hand raised on Zoom. Are you willing to second this?
I am, but I did want to give Councilmember Willie the honor of having this be his last action.
Well,
but,
be that
for
as it may, it wouldn't. Right.
I'll second it.
Okay. Thank you very much, and apologies to John. Thank you very much. Is there any other council comment or future action? And for Councilmember Willie, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm actually happy to just make it a comment. Mayor Paul, thank you so much. I truly believe we all have a responsibility to do as much as we can in the social area, that there are so many people that are not as fortunate as we are, and we do need to be reaching out and helping. And by what you have described there, I think that is an excellent, way for the city to be moving in that direction. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Willie. All right, so Vice Mayor Chow, you have a hand raised. Do you have a future council agenda item or comment that you'd like to provide at this time?
Yeah. So I think the city has a plan to end the homeless. That plan is ongoing. I hope that come back sometime and it might consider this proposal. And for future agenda item, I'd like to propose that we clarify in the municipal code on economical development committee in terms of the terms of office for commission representative and the council members, because that was not meant to be 4 years. So I hope that we can clarify that. And another thing is someone brought up that about the conditions of approval for Main Street regarding the retail percentage. I hope that issue could come back to the council so we can understand that more, and if any modification is necessary. I hope the council and the public can have some input on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Mayor Chow. And let me see if I understood you correctly. Did you say commission approval for the Main Street restaurant?
No, not commission approval.
Conditions of approval. Okay, got it.
Conditions of approval.
Understood. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
I simply misunderstood that word. Okay. And Madam City Manager, as is your want, did you want to ask to see if there was a second for this?
Yes.
Okay.
And Mayor Paul, if I may, so these are more informational items than study session. I'm wondering if council is flexible with possibly informational memo to council first as a base and a foundation, and if necessary, then we'll bring it back for study session.
Okay, are you referring to the two that Vice Mayor Chow is referring to? So
That is
Vice Mayor
correct.
Chow, are you okay with informational memos, or are you asking for something else?
I think for the economical development committee, we need a money code revision.
Money code revision, okay. And then for the other one, you're okay with an informational memo, it sounds like.
I'll second Mayor Chow's, sorry, through the mayor. I'll
Okay,
second
please.
that.
Councilmember Way is seconding the request. Okay, very good.
I'll second for economic development to come back to the council.
Okay. Let's go to back to Vice Mayor Chow with regard to the conditions of approval for the Main Street requirements for retail. Did you? Are you okay with an
I
information
don't know
memo?
what's the timeline on that. That's an item that has a significant community interest. If we get a memo, then we still think it needs to have an item on the council agenda, do I have to propose it in the next council meeting? And then it comes in the following council meeting? And then what's the timeline on that? I don't know.
Okay, what do you propose as your request, Vice Mayor Chow? Do you
What is
want?
a timeline? Is there a timeline on when the staff has to approve certain modification to the?
Well, let's not get into the discussion.
Parameter.
I think we need to keep with the parameters of what you're requesting. Do you want a study session? Do you want an informational memorandum? I know you're asking for some specifics, but that's logistically related, and so let's go ahead and keep it in terms of the substance of the request here.
Okay, so I would like a memo that's put on the council agenda for the public to also know, and then we can discuss.
Okay, so you're asking for an informational item essentially on the agenda. Okay.
On the agenda, not just sent to the council member.
Okay, sounds good. Kitty, Councilmember Moore, did you want to second the request by Vice Mayor Chow, the second request?
Yes, this is an item that I started working with staff and the former city manager many months ago. So I already kind of know what the answer is. But yeah, it should come back as an informational item.
Okay, sounds good. Well, Vice Mayor, you still have your hand raised, but I'm going to go ahead and close this out. If we are, and actually, Councilmember Moore, your hand is raised as well on Zoom, but we'll go ahead and thank everyone. I appreciate everyone's efforts. It's been a great couple of terms. Good night, Director and Acting Assistant City Manager Morley, as he exits Community Hall. So thank you, everyone. And our meeting of the first regular meeting of Cupertino City Council of December 2022 is hereby adjourned. Have a great night.